Hey, y'all.
Hi, Whit.
Hey, Spencer.
Hey, Spencer, just a note, we have hand raising now at our meeting. In the set,
I just saw that. I wondered where it came from. Yeah. So for those of you on computers, feel free to use the hand raise, and we should be able to see it pop up now.
Okay, Father John is joining.
That's great. Okay. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started with the meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 6:03 p.m. I'd like to announce that the meeting is being recorded. And Jonathan, can you do a quick roll call?
Director Brandt?
Here.
Director Geis is absent. Director Bertrand?
Here.
Director Freeman?
Here.
Director Hedges?
Here.
Director Nguyen is absent, and Director Thurlow.
Here, and I'll be on mute.
Thank you. Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the Chumash people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Anaskoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the consent agenda, and then from there, I think we'll go straight into discussion and action items, and from there we'll move back to general public comments after we finish up with our first item, consideration of the resolution to condemn police brutality and declare racism a public health emergency. So going to the consent agenda, do any directors have motions that they'd like to make?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
The motion made by Bertrand, is there a second?
Was George's thumbs up a second?
Yeah, that's a second.
Okay, we have a second by Thurlow. Any public comments? Okay, Jonathan, can you call the roll? I think you might be on mute.
Whoop, my bad. Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Mr. Hedges.
Yes.
All right, motion passes with 5 yes votes and 2 absences. So with that, we're going to move directly to consideration of Resolution 20-9, a resolution to condemn police brutality and declare racism a public health emergency. I wanted to move this item up on our agenda just because of how incredibly timely and important it is right now, given everything that has taken place, given the groundswell that's taken place since we last met as a board. As everyone knows, George Floyd was tragically and brutally murdered by a white police officer in Minneapolis. And the good people of Minneapolis have really risen to the occasion and demanded an end to police violence and structural racism in the process. And their protests, their passion has spread across our nation, across our world, and right here in our own backyard here in Isla Vista. These really are the single largest and possibly the most powerful movement that I've seen in my admittedly short lifetime. And it's calling attention to the plight that our Black brothers and sisters face every day. And it's really incumbent on us as decision makers to hear those voices out. Unfortunately, we have seen as a reaction violence that has been committed by law enforcement in responding to these protests across the country that I think has really only served to reinforce that suspicion that many protesters have, that law enforcement and public safety did not serve them. And I think that feeling in many ways is echoed here in Isla Vista, and I think that it is a very legitimate feeling. Our local students and residents have demanded an end to law enforcement as we know it. And that means no more militarization of our law enforcement apparatus. They've asked why, when it comes to dealing with our houseless individuals, with those facing mental health issues or substance abuse challenges, why is it that we use the bluntest tool in the toolbox, the badge and the gun, to try and respond to these issues? They've asked why we are still pursuing as a society this predictive policing mentality that places targets on the back of Black and brown communities and creates this cycle of enforcement of small infractions that erodes trust in public safety and makes our communities less safe. I want to end there because it's really not my voice that I think deserves to be heard right now. It's those that are on the front lines. It's Black voices that need to be uplifted right now. I want to make it really clear that I hear our community, that Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter every single day, not just in the aftermath of a killing, of a tragedy like this. So with that, I want to open it up to other members of the board who wish to speak on this item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, for your opening remarks. This is a tough time. So many of us are heartbroken by the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and countless other Black Americans who have lost their lives from systemic racism in our country. We have a society that has tolerated and promoted white supremacy and racial inequality. We have not been able to move past the foundational issues of our country, a country built on the backs of slaves, built through a system of racial inequality and marginalization. And years later, we're still confronting this as a nation and as communities like Isla Vista. And it's heartbreaking every time this happens, where we see some of the just huge effects of a system of white supremacy, as we have the past few weeks. But While I'm heartbroken about all of it, and while we know what's happening cannot continue to happen, I do want to say how meaningful and beautiful it has been to see so many community members in Isla Vista stand up to say that Black Lives Matter and stand up to demand change. Many of us attended the rally at Stork Tower and the march that went to Sands Beach that followed. And that was one of the most beautiful moments I've ever experienced in Isla Vista. People came out, especially Black students, and spoke about their experiences in Isla Vista and their experiences in their communities at home, and explained from their perspective what is going on in our nation right now and what needs to change. And a lot of those were really heartfelt comments. I spoke, and I know a lot of us who spoke were vulnerable and really expressed what it is like being a Black person or being a person of color in 2020 here in Isla Vista and throughout America. And right now we're confronting a lot of truths about what that experience is like. And a big part of that is how our criminal justice system interacts with Black people and people of color in this country. We have a system that marginalizes our Black and brown communities, a system that does not address the root causes of issues in our communities, that does not address the mental wellness and health needs of our communities, that does not address poverty, that does not address homelessness, and that certainly does not address racial equity. So I'm really encouraged by a lot of the discussions that we're having right now. And I just want to thank everyone who is making their voices heard in the streets, everyone who is writing into public comment, everyone who is having difficult conversations with their friends and family members, because it's each of those individual actions that bring us one step closer to change. So I really want to thank just everyone who is making their voice heard. I see you, I'm with you, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
There are other board members that wish to speak. I'm going to go to Jay. I see your hand.
Thank you. So this is something that, I mean, it's a very important topic, and it's something that really, I mean, it's almost shameful, right, that we don't spend many more of our meetings, most of our discussion time. Sometimes we're looking at some of these extremely egregious offenses that end up plaguing a portion of our community, and it's something that I really wish, in some sense, that and feel bad that we haven't been concentrated enough on this in the past. And so that's something that with the seeing this resolution then come before our board, I really felt we need to at least do something now. At least today, finally have to try to do something. And so I started trying to really think, well, what is it that we could try to change actively? Because to be honest, I mean, I'm fully in support of our resolution, but at some level, it's simply us continuing to state that we care, but what exactly are we going to do? And just please take this as the joke that it is. I mean, the concrete action that we have in there is that if you want to have a party, we will help you throw that party. But there's certainly policy changes. There's certainly actions that we could take within our board that could at least chip away, if not try to begin to shift the Overton window, as they say, the thought process to try to make some kind of an impact. And also, it makes some kind of an impact. And then I also really started to think about all the various meetings that I've attended in relation to a lot of these issues. And one of the things that continually kind of comes up is this idea that, okay, well, you know, it's those people over there did something bad, but you know, we're fine over here. And even like, I was in the meeting I was attended virtually via Zoom, the Goleta City Council meeting yesterday, where Sheriff Bill Brown was in attendance in order to respond to and answer questions related to some demands that have been coming forward, and the similar resolution that the city of Goleta was looking to respond to. And he describes the situation as some bad actors, maybe a few bad departments that have tarnished the badge, but that he wants to see that we don't paint with a broad stroke and try to say that there's something that might be wrong here in Santa Barbara. That, of course, we're fine. Ironically, he cited statistics from Campaign Zero, stating that the data shows that we're fine, when Campaign Zero themselves looked at their own same data and gave our, sorry, I started receiving a phone call. My camera. There we go. Even that same data, Campaign Zero looks at it, and they assigned us on their police report card a failing grade of F. And so I spent the last 2 days kind of frantically working on a number of amendments that I would like to, not changes, not trying to limit or the scope of anything that we're looking at today. In fact, I want to drastically expand it. This is something that so it's just going to weirdly come as the YouTube Live account, because that's just my desktop computer. Link to a Google Doc here that contains now what I'm about to read, I guess, because I think is the best way to put it into the record as far as having brought this to a meeting. One of the key aspects of this that I will first though present is more in prose, is the idea that
Mr. President, and sorry, Director Freeman, can I make a point of order?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Sorry, I'd like
Ethan had a point of order.
Thank you. So, Director Freeman, I'm really excited to hear about all your amendments, and I think a number of us have different ideas too. But I think if we could hear from other folks just in their opening comments and from the public comment first, and then come back and workshop this, that would be really helpful, because I think we do have some community members who have called in on this.
I'm perfectly happy hearing that. I mean, there's some people on the line that actually contribute to these amendments that I'm hoping will be able to speak. So
fantastic, thank you.
Okay, that sounds great. With that, I don't know if you were sort of conclusion of your comments other than that.
Actually, can that said, I don't know, because of the fact that the way that we tend to run these meetings ends up being that the public only gets one opportunity really to make a comment. I guess I do take issue with the idea that we would not kind of discuss not discussing the wrong term, but at least have fully presented the work that has been done on this before we are able to go to public comment, in case, for example, members of the public either disagree with me or strongly agree with me. It just seems weird but.
So the first thing I want to bring up, someone has mentioned in the chat that sounds like the resolution link is not available on the agenda. So maybe Jonathan, if you can drop that link in the chat there, or I think, there we go. I see we've got that responded to. Okay, glad we got that cleared up.
It is still on the.
So maybe. Thank you, Jonathan. So maybe the best way of going about this would be, Director Freeman, I don't know if you have to read through each of the clauses verbatim, but maybe if you want to present it and sort of give us a summary of the different clauses, and then we can have a discussion.
For what it's worth, I read very quickly and yet like legibly. That's the wrong term, but I feel like I can get through it rather quickly, and as opposed to trying to figure out some way of summarizing processes up for it. I'm not, because a lot of it's actually URLs, so it's not actually that long. I just read it.
Okay. So here's what I think I want to do. I want to give all the board members an opportunity to speak. I'll come back to you to present your amendments, and then from there we can jump into public comment. Okay. Thank you, Director Freeman. Are there any other board members that wish to speak?
I'm happy to give my time to Director Freeman. I'm a little concerned. This is I don't know where you're going with your amendments, but should they include defunding the UC Police Department? I think that's something that we shouldn't be just presented with no time to think about it, discuss it, or whatever. Now, maybe they're just, but given that what your preface was that they're going to be major action items that we're gonna discuss, I'm just a little concerned about the fact that we have about 2.5 minutes here to think about it, and then we're going to be asked to vote on it, and then the vote's going to be very public. So, having said that, I'm happy to give my time over to Director Freeman.
Director Hedges, do you have anything that you want to add before we discuss the amendments?
I do. I am more inclined to be listening and weeping at this moment than I am to be proposing immediate solutions. If I have a position, it is that of, if you'll forgive a religious word, it's a position of repentance. In my conversations with many that I have known back to the civil rights years around the country, many of whom I have marched with ages ago, I am less inclined at this moment to jump quickly to statements than I am to be weeping and to be listening. We have had all too much what I have referred to as moral, ethical ping pong, quite literally going back and forth. You see it writ large with someone like Trump with his equivalencies for everything. Well, there are good people on this side and there are good people on that side and bad people. And we can't address the one thing that is in front of us, that yes, indeed, we do need to change systemic racism. We do need to put it out. It needs to be dealt with. We haven't dealt with it for 400 years, and now perhaps is the time. But how to do that? And is defunding the police the immediate answer? I have seen acts of great compassion by law enforcement and acts of horrific bad behaving. I have seen sacrifice. As I've stood with them, I've seen them do things that showed incredible restraint, and I've seen them do things that I had to tell them that they needed to stop that. So is the answer defunding police? I'm not prepared to say one way or the other at this point. Is it time to reimagine the whole damn system? Yes. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
For your comments, Father John. I do want to implore my colleagues before we continue, before we get down a potential side track of talking about the rhetoric around defunding and how that's used, maybe to take a look at the amendments that are being presented and to allow Director Freeman to explain what those amendments are. It's not my understanding that either of those things are a part of the proposed amendments. So with that, I just want to refocus the conversation and allow Director Freeman to explain his amendments. And I think probably with a particular focus on our resolved clauses. And I do want to implore you if you can sort of go through it with brevity so that we can go and get input from our public. I really think that it's them that we should be listening to right now. So with that, I'll go over to you.
Thank you. I absolutely appreciate that. I will say though that the idea that we will only have 2.5 minutes to respond to this. It is our job to do these meetings, and so we have as long as it takes in order to look into these things. To the extent to which we're not ready to do something today, then we should look at these things seriously, discuss them at length, and then pledge to look at things at our next meeting. The idea that we are going to look at that we're going to take our time now in order to weep and then do something later is effectively what we've been doing for centuries at this point. So that's why and the final thing is as a process point, is that particularly in case anyone in the audience is interested in this. I did a drastic amount of the writing so that it would actually be prepared in order to be able to at least be glanced at by our lawyer to see whether it would be legal or not. But it is difficult in order for a board member who is not the person who put together the agenda item to really provide context to the other board members. And so in some sense, the idea that I'm bringing this to this meeting, that's the process that public night meetings have, is that I will bring this to the meeting and we will supposedly discuss it at the meeting and then maybe schedule it for the next meeting. But this idea that this is just how it works. All right, but so to try to just very rapidly go through some of this, I look and in the process of the whereas clauses, I recontextualize a lot of what I think with looking at the Deltobia riots. And one key thing that I want to point at there is the idea that the triggering moment actually does seem to have been the violent chase, takedown, and arrest of an unarmed Black teenage minor that led to a momentary protest that then over the police scanners and things like was listed as officer down, which then ended up causing this essentially fearful police riot that ended up in response. And I provide numerous links and references looking at eyewitness testimony, reporting done of the testimonials that were done in the court cases of the kid who was charged as an adult, by the way, by our district attorney until a ballot prop forced the hand and to bring it back to juvenile court because we didn't actually like the idea of arbitrarily charging people as adults. I look at the amount of money that's spent and these particular brutal processes that we sometimes use that are just done with indiscriminate effect, such as using tear gas and rubber bullets sprayed into a crowd, which is used here in Isla Vista. I look back at previous complaints that have been brought up, such as the 2015 the UCSB task force against police brutality, and I pose the and look at the issue specifically has been brought up of people of color who have said that they have felt either discriminated against or targeted. I've looked at some of the racial injustice issues that have been brought forward, such as the concerns, not necessarily conclusions, but the concerns that were brought up around the death of Andrea Esteban Sanchez. I bring in material from Ryan Flaco Rising, who has this very good, I think, video demonstration of profiling and repeated harassment that is being done against former incarcerated people, and then point out the fact that African Americans are incarcerated at a rate 5 times greater than that of white Americans. I then look at the failing grade that we've that our sheriff's department has obtained, and then show how the process by which our deputy sheriff's association locally lobbies against and argues and has even filed legal injunctions in order to stop progress at the legislative level in on transparency. I then start to turn attention towards this notion of defunding, which, to be clear, is not simply removing all of the funding immediately. I mean, when you talk about defunding education, for example, which we talk about weirdly a lot, right? And we're upset about it, hopefully on our side of the aisle, most of us. But it's not that education has been cut to zero. It's the idea that teachers maybe not necessarily being given some of the resources and things. Our budgets are just so lopsided right now, and that's the idea is that to try to figure out how to reshift our budgets so that we're spending more time on things like social workers and more time on more funding on social workers, more funding on what should really be the true first responders, because an armed officer showing up with a gun should really be a responder of last resort. And I then finally turn the whereas clauses to attention to our own district, which just to provide the settings, and that's what the whereas clauses do, that we have this power that is related to public safety, sadly somewhat in some sense limited, to look at contracting with existing agencies, but that is something that, I mean, we have used somewhat flexibly in order to try to negotiate with these agencies. So that brings me then to the resolutions that I have. And so I have that be it further resolved that this district considers a police officer armed as they are with deadly weaponry to be responders of last resort, and that first responders should generally mean health care workers, medical professionals, and fire services. That this district calls on the county of Santa Barbara to actively move to reduce the budget of the sheriff's department and look into alternative models of public safety focused on social services such as housing and mental health, with the eventual goal of no longer relying on police for safety, so we could one day abolish them. I'm not saying immediately completely. That this district in the interim calls on the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department and the UC Santa Barbara Police Departments to institute a strict use of force policy based on the model provided by Campaign Zero, which is the organization that gave us that failing grade, and which is looked at what you can do in essentially without having to completely defund things like that. That this district formally requests that law enforcement officers attending its public meetings do so without being armed with lethal weapons. I've over the years heard many concerns from community members who have felt fearful to attend our public meetings because they feel themselves targeted by police, and they feel that they end up being disproportionately affected. That this district demands the acceptance of a civilian police review board by the County of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department, given actual power to investigate charges of police misconduct and to not only suspend police officers from active duty, but to terminate employment. That this district directs its staff to proceed with all future negotiations with law enforcement agencies for new and renewed contracts with a goal of getting contractual terms that lock in, if even incrementally, restrictions on force, limits on deployment expenditure, and any other concessions that further these goals, because we do have this negotiating chip. That this district will send a letter to our representatives on the California State Legislature calling on them to once again examine use of force, stressing the importance of the various provisions that have been removed from AB 392, which I had explained in the whereas clause. That this district does not consider it appropriate to bring hundreds of armed law enforcement officers to the streets of Isla Vista during Halloween in Deltopia, and ask that the police riot of 2014, which is some story, the line that I explained throughout the course of the whereas clauses that provide many references on, not be used against our community. That this district asks that the University of California, Santa Barbara no longer fund the militarization of police forces serving Isla Vista. That this district yearns to see the completion of the Isla Vista Sobering Center to be run by community members who are health professionals, with an internship program for future health professionals and counselors to prevent Isla Vista residents from being transported to the downtown county jail and dealing with the dehumanizing booking process, and will demand accountability on its status, because we have the opportunity to start setting up meetings and calling in people from the county and actually watching the progress of this taking place. That this district will look into options for establishing a phone line allowing undocumented community members to call for assistance with someone violating them and or their property without having to call on the police. That this district considers the use of ballistic weapons such as baton rounds, rubber bullets, and or kinetic impact projectiles, and chemical agents such as tear gas against crowds to be an unacceptable escalation of violence and indiscriminate form of mass punishment, and asks that they not be used in Isla Vista. And finally, that this district will examine options for obtaining its own public safety power, allowing it to not contract with or fund law enforcement, potentially with funding carved out of the existing sheriff's budget as paid for the county in Isla Vista, including but not limited to LAFCO, special legislation, or incorporation as its own city. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Director Freeman. So now that we've heard that, and I think everyone's got a chance to look at the resolution, I'm going to open up public comment. In order to make public comment, you can either raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button. You can turn on your camera, give me a wave. You can throw something in the chat saying that you would like to do public comment, or you can send an email to myself or our general manager, and we will put you on stack. Are there any comments?
Flaco Rising is raising his hand in the video.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, my internet's a little laggy, so I can't always see. I'm going to go over to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Mr. Freeman. That was very powerful. I came to UCSB to change my whole entire trajectory of my life. I've been incarcerated since the age of 12. I went through the school to prison pipeline. And upon coming here, walking down the street to go meet my wife at Portola Hall, I was, brutally profiled and harassed by Isla Vista sheriff. He jumped out of the car. He got in front of me. He told me if I'm on probation or parole. He asked for my name. He totally just humiliated me in front of my classmates and in front of my community. This has to stop. And I spoke up on this. I asked for him to be fired. He proudly announces it in a video saying that he does this all the time, that he gives thousands of citations to this community. It's a revenue scheme. They don't give out any scholarships. When has Isla Vista sheriffs handed a scholarship to a UCSB student? These are things that we got to really look at. Instead, they take money, and they take money. They use certain events that have happened in this community as a way to extract millions of dollars into their accounts, into their budgets. We need to wake up. We really need to see what's going on, and we need to see that enough's enough. We need to uplift our community, and we need to uplift our community members, and we need to start by defunding the police and getting and allocating these funds back to our community for our community members to live the righteous life that they deserve. And that's all I got to say. Thank you for having me today, and thank you, Jay, for speaking up on justice and equality for all.
Thank you, Flaco. Thank you for those comments. I'm going to go over to Yasmin Salari next.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Yasmin Solari. I'm a third-year political science major, and I'm currently serving as the Associated Students External Vice President for Local Affairs. I'm here today to urge you in passing the resolution condemning police brutality and declaring racism a public health emergency. This is not the case of few bad apples. In the United States, Black people are more likely to be killed by the police, more likely to be unarmed, while less likely to be threatening someone when killed. While Black people make up 13% of the US population, they encompass 27% of all killings by the police, with 34% of those killed being unarmed and not attacking anyone. Between 2013 and 2019, of the 7,666 people killed by the police officers in the US, 0.3% resulted in a conviction and 1% resulted in a charge but no conviction. I have been serving in this role for about a month now, and I can already see the need for police accountability in our own community, which was most widely expressed at the student-led protest recently. As nationwide protests have shined a light on systemic racism and police brutality in our country, we must remember that statements of support for the Black Lives Matter movement and condemning racist behavior are only the first steps in addressing this public health emergency. As leaders in our community, we must go above statements of solidarity and establish concrete actions as through those amendments just mentioned for the way we will change policing in our community in a manner that makes our Black students and community members feel safe. However, it is imperative for Black students and community members to be leading these conversations in the changes they would like to see in policing on campus and in Isla Vista. Whenever a tragedy like this happens, and maybe surfaces national news, we're quick to respond, donate, and provide resources. While these things are great remedy solutions, we need to be proactive and not reactive to these murders. It shouldn't have to take one of our own community members to be responsive to these situations. By passing this resolution, we are taking the early and necessary steps to acknowledge, address, and point towards a more equitable and safe future for all Isla Vista residents. Thank you.
Oh, I see, I think a hand from Gina. I'll go over to you.
Thank you, Spencer, Director Brandt. My name is Gina Sawaya. I am a 2-year Isla Vista resident and local community organizer. I would like to speak to strongly urge the board to adopt these resolutions put forward by Director Freeman and to declare racism a public health emergency. These resolutions are not radical, as public support has shown in the past few weeks that these items are long overdue. There is widespread public support for them, and they are not issues that are in some other community. Director Brandt's research shows, and I should not say research, but compilation of these issues shows that Isla Vista has been plagued by abusive policing for too long. And if the board does not take swift action to adopt these resolutions, I do think there will be public outcry. And I do think that putting this off would lose the momentum of something that the public needs and wants very badly. None of these resolutions are anything that haven't been done in other areas. We can use other cities as models for on how to implement these. They're nothing to be afraid of. And in fact, I think that the community would really embrace these, as it's a majority student community that's affected by policing every day. I think the demilitarization of police is essential, especially in a college town where we're not dealing with large swaths of populations that are armed. I think that resolution may be one of the more important ones on here. So I would just like to conclude that I really, really urge you to adopt these resolutions, and that the board will be held accountable for the steps that Isla Vista takes to demilitarize its police force. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you, Gina. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? I see a comment in the chat from Daniel Montgomery. I'm going to go over to you.
Thank you. I've been a member of the extended Isla Vista community for more than 20 years now. And Isla Vista has always been treated really as a problem by the county and the surrounding cities. It's never been given any kind of respect or sense of autonomy. If we want Isla Vista to be a community that organizes itself, we need to think very hard about what our community standards are. Isla Vista is subject to policing projected onto it from outside of the community. The sheriff's department, the CHP, and the UCPD. And if the community is going to set its own standards, if it's going to make its own choices about how what life in Isla Vista is supposed to be, then I think that it's imperative for this body to take this moment, this unique moment that we may never see again in our lifetimes. I don't know that I expect to see anything quite like this again, this chance to make a change. This body needs to take this opportunity to make a strong demand. And if it doesn't, it risks irrelevance. And so I would strongly encourage you to vote in favor of Director Freeman's amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Any other requests to speak on this item?
So there's some hands raised if you want to check that.
Okay, I see. Can you let me know who they are? Because I can't always see everybody.
It was Ryan White, Deanna Collins Puente, and Charlotte Mahoney.
Okay, we'll begin with Ryan, and then after Ryan, we'll go to Deanna. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm echoing most everybody else's sentiment when I'm saying that I would also urge the community to vote strongly in favor of this resolution. Even I think these are also, I agree with the previous speaker that these are not radical reforms by any means. They're long overdue, and there's widespread public support for these. And I think even a cursory look at even public record things like finance can see tons and tons of waste, if nothing else, between armed patrols of areas where the worst crimes you see are drinking tickets and petty crime break-ins. For the most part, there's an unbelievable over-response of the police relative to the needs of the community. And just simply put, their money could be better used and served elsewhere to help the community. So again, I echo everyone else's statement when they say to strongly vote in favor of this resolution.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to go over to Deanna Collins Puente now.
Maybe we need to unmute her. You're unmuted. Should be.
I think I'm muted again. Let's see. Okay. I'm speaking with you today as a member of the Isla Vista community, not in my role with Associated Students. I have been a member of the Isla Vista community for 6 years now. And I want to express that I joined Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara, Santa Barbara, in all the demands that they have made of our elected officials. As you know, it is way past time for us to act. I am glad to see the board consider the demands from the Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara, and I am also urged the board to closely consider the amendments made by Director Freeman, but to really continue to center any of that work around the demands from Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara. I believe that our work towards the beloved community effort in this community requires long-term sustained effort that we have to take to address anti-Blackness in our community, our institutions, our structures, and our system. And I do believe that the time to act is now. I strongly support continuing to work as a community together towards advancing these concerns that have existed not just now, but for generations. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Diana. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak?
I will note that Charlotte Mahoney left a comment on the group chat. Maybe it could be read into the record.
Sure, I'll go ahead and do that now. Charlotte Mahoney's comment is, thank you to the directors for considering these amendments. As a resident of Isla Vista for the past 4 years, I want to strongly encourage the directors to pass these amendments this week. Reforming the IVPD opens up the space to allow our community to become much stronger together and support by POC. We cannot wait until another incident occurs. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Are there any other people who wish to speak?
Kenny Morris is raising his hand on video.
Hi, Spencer.
Kenny, I will go over to you now.
Awesome. Thank you, Director Grant. Yeah, thank you guys for considering this and being a part of the change. It means a lot and doesn't go unnoticed. I would like to speak in support of this resolution, and I think that we should consider going further and adopting Jay's resolution. I mean, I'd like to echo all the sentiments that have been said before. I think that they're all very valid and they speak to a real deep need for change in our community and our country. And I'd like to speak quickly to Father John's point. I agree that we do need to mourn, and we can, by taking strong action, we can prevent mourning in the future. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Kenny. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak?
Melissa Cohen is on video.
Hi.
Okay, I'll go over to you, Melissa.
Wasn't planning to speak, but yet here I sit through this really powerful part of the meeting. I definitely want to speak first in support of all the demands that came through Black Lives Matter in the past week, and also the youth that brought forward some really important demands to Santa Barbara Unified from Sunday. And I also want to speak in support of what this board is thinking into supporting. One thing that hasn't really been mentioned yet, aside from all the incredible things that have been mentioned, is I think Isla Vista has a real opportunity here. And, you know, I've been around for some years now through more of like a long game, and what I've seen through some things that have been made better through our relationship with our law enforcement. And I just want to be, I'm anxious to talk about this because it's sort of like a different lens. And so I just want to presence my nervousness to say this in this group, but I think we have a captive law enforcement. I think we have potentially a lieutenant that feels connected to some of the work that we've brought forward in terms of things like community policing and restorative justice, not to put forth buzzwords around what law enforcement is doing. And I'm not trying to put that forth as the holy grail of solutions. However, we also change lieutenants here every couple of years, and that's something that can be pretty detrimental for Isla Vista, because continuity is something that our community really requires with so much transition of our citizens. And we uniquely have, oh, sorry, my internet connection is not great, so my video might go out, but can you still hear me? Yes, we can still hear me, great. And so with this IVCSD, which we haven't had for very long, we have this really interesting opportunity for a board to advocate for some type of continuity that can outpace the transition of the shitty structure of law enforcement that creates this lack of continuity in the people that actually drive forward a lot of the, you know, the energy that weaves through our precinct here in IV. Like, it really, lieutenant helps set the stage for that. And I think that our board might have an interesting opportunity that other communities don't totally have, which is a captive audience right now in law enforcement that might actually want to hear some of this. And that, you know, in reading through everything, it's not really groundbreaking. You know, it's not stuff that ruffles so many feathers based on conversations I know us have had to have with law enforcement over the years, because like a bunch of really bad stuff has happened in IV. And I think that this is a unique small city. You know, we are tiny, but we have our complete share of tons of problems and challenges and catastrophic events that have faced other much bigger cities. And so within that, I do think that we have a unique opportunity. And so I just wanted to speak into some of the change that I've seen happen. And of course, this is the tiniest little bit up a giant steep mountain to climb. But if not for this opportunity of having a local government and a local entity to really help set a stage for what our expectations are, and if we're thinking about business and setting the stage, you have to have clear expectations for what we want to see and how our community runs. And this is, if nothing else, setting a stage for clear expectations of what we want to see happen. And so I think it's just a really unique Isla Vista moment with a group of people that actually can help seed a new expectation and allow community voice to be heard, which is something that we all know that we are very good at doing here in Ivy and actually affecting really high level change, which is part of how we have the CSD in the first place. So I just wanted to speak to that. Thank you. Sorry, my video went away.
Thank you for your comments, Melissa. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak? I'm not seeing anyone. I don't know if anyone else, maybe with better internet than I have, sees anyone.
Holly Mays just raised a hand.
Holly, I will go over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Spencer. Hello, everyone. My name is Holly Mays, and I'm a resident of Goleta. I do, however, currently serve as the Assistant Director of Governmental Affairs with Associated Students. And so my work is deeply connected with the community of Isla Vista and the students that are the residents in that community. I'm here to support those students and our Black community in Santa Barbara and speak in favor of the resolution that is on your table today, condemning police brutality and declaring racism as a public health emergency in Isla Vista. And I'd like to keep this short because I do believe that it's not my voice that is the one that is needed in this conversation. And so I would like to reaffirm the words that have been spoken by two of my colleagues, Yasmin Solari and Diana Collins-Puente. While I do support the amendments that are proposed by Director Freeman, I urge you to continue to center the demands of Healing Justice Santa Barbara in your work, because it is that community that has been doing this activism for much longer than we have come into this work. And it is really critical to continue to hone your efforts to be centered in their demands. It is, you know, we've spoken about it as if it is truly a gift that they've given us a roadmap to the solution. And your positions as directors are super critical, and I just urge you to continue to center their voices in your work while you continue to also engage with the community here in Isla Vista.
Thank you for your comments, Holly. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else unless someone wants to wave at me and let me know I'm missing somebody. Okay, then with that, I think I'm gonna go ahead and bring it back to the board. I really wanna thank everyone who joined us today to comment on this issue. I think the volume and the passion of our speakers really indicate just how serious our community is taking this issue and this moment in particular, and I really appreciate that. So I just want to say sort of a thought that I had a couple of days ago after attending our vigil that was organized at Sea Lookout Park for George Floyd and for all of our Black brothers and sisters that have been lost to police and white supremacist violence. I had a thought, and I haven't really been able to shake it since then, which is a thought about about George Floyd. And it's a simple wonder. It's a wonder, it's my wondering what he would think, what he would think if he could see the uprising, the change, if he could see the activism, the passion, and if he could feel the change in the air that his untimely and unfortunate murder caused, what would he think? We all, I think, in one way or another, contemplate our own mortality. And I don't think any of us ever assume that when that day comes, that it will be as impactful as his has been. So I really want to just take a second to remember him and all of our Black brothers and sisters that have lost their lives to police and white supremacist brutality. I also want to address, just before we continue our discussion about our resolutions, the fact that I fully support the demands that have been brought by Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara, Juneteenth Santa Barbara, and our Black student activists that are actively forming demands as we speak right now. And I think that it's important that whatever action our board takes echoes that and centers those concerns first and foremost. And that's really what's going to be driving my thinking as we move forward consideration of this. So I want to open it up for other board members who would have anything to say. I see Director Friedman has his hand up, so I'm going to go over to you.
I want to I want to make very clear that I absolutely agree that we should be centering the demands for Black Lives Matters, and I'm actually from that standpoint, I want to make clear that as I was working on my amendments, I started with the Black Lives Matters demands as essentially the template for how could I, as a politician, and then bring to us as a board, be able to actually enact the changes. And so when you look at, for example, the demands, things like create a civilian review board with members selected by community. And I provided as one of the resolutions expanded wording and whereas clauses in order to defend, and essentially just structured it in the form of something that our body could vote on. Prioritize mental health services and rehabilitation, which was directly one of the resolutions that I put into my amendment. Update use of force policy to center de-escalation, looking at, well, how could I really make that concrete on something that I could actually feel the Sheriff's Department might be able, not, let's just say, weasel out of. And so we look at this Campaign Zero has a specific template for how to update a use of force policy to center de-escalation. And so I put that into the list of demands. I had a difficult time working within the scope of our jurisdiction on how to do things like no isolation quarantine for inmates attending court or contacting lawyers, because we don't have any jails in our jurisdiction, and jails are somewhat more complicated. But I ended up getting some help from other community members, including Ryan Flago Rising, on how to look at aspects of that. But I appreciate that, while I haven't succeeded in checking off all of the boxes here, I also no more community conversation without change to policy and practices. That was the premise of, okay, well, instead of just saying that I'm going to satisfy all of these, let's build a set of amendments to our resolution that actually shows the specific actions and changes to our policies and practices that will allow us to actually check off no more internal investigations, create civilian review board, priority mental health services, update use of force policies. So that was, I absolutely want to center the Black Lives Matters demands, and that's what I feel like the amendments do, is they actually show our commitment to it. I also tried to get feedback, for what it's worth, from the Healing Justice Santa Barbara. I ended up getting contact information actually through Deanna's. Thank you so much and I sent immediately an email. I have not heard back from them yet. So it is also something that I appreciate that I have not yet heard back of them saying, for example, that oh, you totally missed the point. But I'm trying to do what I can in the position that I am to satisfy these demands as opposed to merely giving support.
Thank you, Director Freeman, for your comments. Are there any other comments from board members? I think I see a hand from George, so I'm going to go over to Director Thurlow.
George, you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, it's not working to unmute him for some reason.
You are still on mute, George.
I'm trying to get you unmuted, George. Give me a second.
How's that? Is that better?
We can hear you.
Okay. First of all, it's really, really clear that this board is unanimous and the community is unanimous in supporting the resolution that Spencer, you brought forward. I think we're all just preaching to the choir here about what this country's racism is all about, and how important this time is that we're forcing people to address it. Although none of this means anything if in November we don't have a major shift in power. I still don't have Jay's resolutions in front of me. I was confused throughout the conversation as to whether people were expressing support for the resolution that's on the agenda or the amendments to the resolution. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jay, but I don't think this is the way we do it, where we just bring some very, very important, very precedent setting, very complicated calls for action to a board meeting, and then not have it in front of the board members who are supposed to vote on it, with clearly the threat that if you don't vote for this, you're not supporting anti-racism. I just want to pull out the police review board. That is so critical. Been called for in this community for 30 years. 30 years, a police review board. But we don't just throw it on a agenda, not share any of the details, and then say, okay, everybody, we're heroes. We should put forward a clear plan for a police review board that's more than just, it should have citizen members. I mean, police review boards are incredibly complicated and they can work, but you don't just call for it. And so I can't vote on something that's not in front of me, and I couldn't write fast enough, despite my 40 years of being a note taker when Jay talked. I love the work you've done, Jay. I mean, it's very, very clear that you have taken on a huge project here. You've produced some great work. You don't have to refer to yourself as a politician. You're a community activist. But I really do think that we should vote on the first resolution. It's easy. It's a slam dunk. We're all in agreement that racism is apparent everywhere in our society. And then let's take the second piece of it, piece by piece, and go through it, identify which ones are the top priorities. And I would say a police review board is, and really flesh it out, and then put forward a proposal that isn't just going to die next week, because just voting to say, oh, we should have a police review board, that doesn't mean anything. So that's my 2 cents. I'm going to abstain because, again, I don't have the amendments in front of me. I think it's irresponsible to vote on something that you don't have in front of me. On the other hand, Spencer, I wholeheartedly appreciate the fact that you brought the police brutality and racism resolution to this meeting.
Thank you for your comment, Director Thurlow. I'm going to go back to Director Freeman, and then I'm going to go to Director Hedges.
Thank you. For what it's worth, George, I mean, I share your frustration with how the process of how these governments work. For what it's worth, I mean, Jonathan, I was able to actually get the nearly finalized version of my amendments to our lawyer yesterday, and we were discussing earlier today whether it would be possible for the rest of the board to be given a copy of my amendments before the meeting. That the way that public government seems to work is that I'm supposed to bring this information to the meeting, and then we're supposed to actually take the time to maybe together spend an hour going over the text. We're not in a rush here. We don't have just a couple of minutes in order to do these decisions. We have as long as we think is relevant in order to actually make our decisions and do our jobs. But that said, to the extent to which you want to push this, when we could do this. When? I mean, we can call special meetings. It's the glorious property and able to do these things. And we're able to try to look at these issues more quickly. I will say that as far as things like, well, you don't just do something, but at the same time we say that, well, it doesn't do anything. Committing our support to something like the Civilian Review Board, when that was one of the key demands of Black Lives Matters that I think we are all looking at trying to center here is I think at least something. And then that actually demonstrates even to ourselves when we come back 2 weeks from now and we say, all right, let's sit down and figure out how we're actually going to make this happen. Most of the things, if we were to actually sit down, and again, I think that that's something that we would do as a government body, sit down, actually go through the idea of, as somebody had even mentioned earlier in this meeting, the idea of workshopping. I think it might have been you, that we could go through and look at the way that I worded some of these things. It's always looking at the practicality of what we can do now. So for example, not saying that we will immediately declare ourselves a city, this is a random example, but that instead that we will begin a process of looking into how to obtain a certain kind of power through various opportunities, whether it be LAFCO, et cetera. That's essentially just us resolving that 2 weeks from now we'll come back and actually start having agenda items to address the issues that are on this that are in these resolutions. So I continue to believe that it is worthwhile to at least look at them today and to decide whether or not we would want to, whether maybe it's more clear once you've actually seen them, and I think we can get them, we can work on this right now, or to try to figure out, let's schedule when we will look at the brick of them, not sprinkle them out through the course of the future and figure out, when these things might end up happening.
Thank you, Director Freeman. I'm going to go over to Director.
Just one last point. I also will say that I believe that. I was going to comment there, and I will also say that I think of the people who are in the audience, many of them actually did specifically say Jay's amendments, and I will say that many of them have been involved in the process of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Freeman. Director Hedges, you can go ahead now.
There are matters on which we have unanimous consent at this point. That racism is a public health emergency that has life and death consequences that we haven't addressed yet. We are in agreement. That Black Lives Matter, we are in agreement. To that, every one of us would kneel and lay down our shields in front of us. We would stand in agreement and in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, with Juneteenth, and with everybody that I've stood with over the last 55 years. We all agree that there is a need for transparency and oversight, and that a civilian review board would be a way to address that. We don't yet know all the details of how that might work, but we do agree in principle unanimously that that's how it should be. We also agree that we are way past time to act. 400 years of grievances that have not had redress, that have not been answered, that have not even been listened to, that have been pushed back and suppressed. We all agree to that. But beyond that, there are a lot of details here that we aren't yet in agreement on. And deferring a platform with a lot of planks, I think we can wait a little while to put something before, because we want it to stick. We want it to support true change. And in Isla Vista, the community service district is the promise of a kind of a hope that a lot of communities don't operate under. And we have a unique potential here to find that consensus, not just because we have each gone to our parties and expressed a point of view that's comfortable to each of our parties, but we have come to an honest to goodness consensus in the community. And we have law enforcement that is receptive. And lest we drive into the corner that consensus that we have made, I'd like to wait a little while on this. But as I said, there is consensus that we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter as a principle, as a statement, with Juneteenth, with the fact that racism's got to stop, with the fact we need a civilian review board, and we're way past time to act. But beyond that, I'd have to abstain.
Thank you, Father John.
Mr. President, if I may.
Are there? Go ahead, Director Bertrand.
Thank you. So I want to thank all the community members who spoke today. I really appreciate all that was said, and I appreciate the hard work that everyone's doing. People aren't just reposting and recirculating ideas, which there are many worthy ideas to repost and recirculate, but I also see so many community members really thinking about how do we make our community safer in a holistic way that protects our communities of color, that honors Black and Brown lives, that provides dignity and respect to members of our community from all walks of life, that is not just race neutral or not merely race neutral, but is anti-racist. I really appreciate all of those efforts and ideas that people are developing, and I'm excited to see how our district can best support these initiatives. I want to start off by taking a step back and just mentioning that I really acknowledge the experience of people of color in our community dealing with law enforcement. It's something that I've personally navigated. I've lived in Isla Vista for 6 years now. I live here with a twin brother, and I live here with my 19-year-old younger brother who's come out to school here. Living in a community that is highly policed, to say the least, can be very frightening as a person of color. I mean, I think I've done a good job navigating it, but I've had worries about my brothers out in Isla Vista, especially my younger brother coming out here. And even when I have been conscious about the risks that we face as young men of color in this community, that's not even enough to prevent uncomfortable interactions with law enforcement. I want to be honest with you all. In the past 2 years, I've been stopped by the police for walking in my neighborhood. It's disrespectful, it's uncalled for, and it's intimidating being stopped by people with guns and badges who are stopping you because they suspect you of doing wrongdoing when you're just in your own neighborhood. I've had those experiences, and I know that there are many Isla Vista residents who have had much more serious experiences that have escalated into violence. And even when it does not escalate into violence, it is still a very uncomfortable situation. a situation that makes you feel bad for being in your own community. So I just want to take a step back and acknowledge that. In addition to my brothers here in Isla Vista, I had this experience a couple months ago, or about a year ago now, rather, when my father came to Isla Vista to visit us for my brother's graduation from UCSD. When he came, he was spending a lot of time outside in our lovely community, which is awesome. But I had to tell him, Dad, there are people in our community who are racist, like any other community. And there are people in our community who may, out of racism, perceive you as a threat. And that's something we need to remember. And that was a painful conversation to have. And it was a funny conversation to have from a son to a father, because it's often the reverse role in this country, these talks that families have to have. But I just want to acknowledge that those are the conversations that people in Isla Vista have. We are worried about how we interact with law enforcement. We are worried about if we're going to be seen as a threat. So I just want to put that on the table. And I also want to acknowledge that many people in Isla Vista have been the subject to racist violence. And that's something that we need to grapple with and acknowledge. There are community members who have suffered from police brutality, as Director Freeman pointed out in the start of the Isla Vista riot. As we all know, in the civil rights movement and Vietnam War era in Isla Vista, there was an unarmed student activist who was shot. I just say this all to illustrate that Isla Vista is not immune from these issues, but rather this is a place where these issues have shaped the trajectory of our community. So with all that being said, I am encouraged by much of the work that's being done, and also Melissa Cohen's comment before about how Isla Vista really has a great opportunity here. I think that our community, being the diverse place that it is, with people from all walks of life and people with energy to make change, I really do think that we can be a leader in this area. I want to commend President Brandt for bringing forward this resolution tonight. I think it's deeply moving, and I appreciate the points that are in it. I also want to thank Director Freeman for bringing forward his amendments tonight. I am very interested in looking at these more and talking about them. It is challenging when we are given them just hours before the meeting, especially when there are so many and this is so important. I also want to mention that it would be helpful in the future when we do things like this if directors Brown Act partner with other directors, so it's not just a surprise, especially when we have two directors of color on this board who care a lot about these issues and would love to be in the conversation. So with that being said, I do support the resolution that Director Brandt has put forward tonight. I have heard a lot of talk tonight about the civilian oversight boards, which I think are great ideas. And I think that if we were to add anything to the resolution that we're passing tonight, it would be one more whereas, where we voice our support for civilian review and oversight of law enforcement services in Isla Vista. If we do want to add anything, I think that would be a great thing for us to add tonight. But other than that, I really hope that we can pass this resolution and continue to discuss the points that Director Freeman and other directors bring up, because this really is just a starting point. And I trust that my colleagues on this call and members of our community really just see these moments as a starting point for our continued advocacy for systemic change. We have a long way to go, but I'm excited for us to start now. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. I also just want to say a big thank you to Director Freeman for bringing these amendments forward. There are some incredibly important things that we've all spoken about tonight that are acknowledged in your amendments. And I think someone said it, called it research. And I've considered a research project. You've got the footnotes, and maybe you don't have them cited in Chicago style, but I still consider it research, and we really appreciate your attentiveness on that front. I also want to be really cognizant of something that you said earlier, that really struck me from the very beginning when I joined the Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara Juneteenth protests this last Sunday, I believe it was, or not this past Sunday, but the original protest in Santa Barbara, which was no more words without policy change. And I think that is the core of where we all are in agreement tonight. Our board was created to oversee a community services district. We have the different things that we are allowed to do and authorized to do by law, imprinted in the law, but inherent to the idea of a community services district is services. It's tangible ways that we improve people's lives in the community. History is going to judge us all, not just this board, but our community and our collective world community by what actions we take right now and not by our words. And with that in mind, I want to just say that I think that the suggestions that have been made to try and take some of these action items that you put forward in the resolve clauses and work out a tangible plan for how we are going to get there, how we're going to pressure the decision makers that we need to in order to make the right decision on those is what is necessary. Because frankly, I think a lot of us are tired of talking about the problem instead of actually being able to go out and change some of these things. And we have, I think, an incredible amount of momentum. The amount of people who have joined us tonight over Zoom to voice their support for anti-racism, for proactive anti-racism, is really a testament to that. So I'm very supportive of incorporation of I think there is the suggestion that if there's one thing that we can unequivocally approve our support for, it's more oversight of law enforcement. That amendment is very friendly in terms of exactly how we get there. I think we need to flesh out a plan rather than just putting out sort of our statements. And so I would say that we form a working group to flesh out and consider each point of Director Freeman's demands and put together a plan for them and others. I think that working group should really include Black and Brown voices in our community, student activists. I really appreciate that you were able to contact or try and get in contact with the Black Lives Matter and Juneteenth organizers. And I know from speaking with Crystal a couple of days ago that they are so swamped with everyone contacting them. And I can imagine it's incredibly overwhelming. But I think we should make it a point to include them and our other groups that are more local to the community, such as the UCSB Black Student Union and other organizations like it, in order as we consider how these plans move forward. I'm going to go to Jay.
So it's sounding like the resolution that was brought on the agenda that we're going to be able to get at least create a civilian review board, members selected by the community due to our unanimous support thereof, that we could add at least to take the Black Lives Matters demands version of that text and just state our support. I mean, to the extent to which, I wish we would do even more, but is that what it's sounding like? So we can get that?
I think that's where I'm at, and I'm very supportive of that. And I think Ethan actually has helped us out with some language in the chat. The district calls on local law enforcement agencies to establish independent civilian oversight bodies and/or complaint review boards. And so I personally am supportive of that language.
So that sounds good to me as well. So while we're playing the what do we actually seem to have some good support for here, I might ask update use of force policy to center de-escalation is another one of the entries from the Black Lives Matters demands to the San Bernardino County Sheriff. And to me, it seems like a fairly simple one. Maybe others disagree, but that's one also where if we wanted something concrete, I know that the Sheriff's Department already looks at Campaign Zero, and to the extent to which we could say to use the Campaign Zero model for a use of force policy, I think that would be a relatively simple one to look at. But I'm just seeing what I can get here.
I think
Yes,
at least
Jay,
for me personally, those things that are expressed in the Black Lives Matter Santa Barbara demands are, I think, things that we can all find support around, I believe. And that definitely falls under the demands. George, are you waving? I gotta go over to you.
Yeah, I'm trying to stay cool. I think we should do that. I think we should pass it. And then the very next motion should be that we put what we're now calling the Freeman document, put it on the next board agenda for, set aside an hour. I agree. Let's do an hour's worth of discussion on the various points. It'll be very, very superficial. But can you read that amendment back about, there was a word in there, which I think the word was oversight. And I think we want to use another word, accountability or anything, but oversight implies something which is never going to fly. Is that the word that you were using?
So the language is, the district calls on local law enforcement agencies to establish independent civilian oversight bodies and or complaint review boards.
Yeah, oversight is a word that will get twisted.
For what it's worth, the Black Lives Matter one did not actually use the word oversight. So if you, maybe.
Yeah, Father John? What word would you use?
It's examining complaints. I mean, the thought of oversight means that you're a generator of policies and overseeing the implementation of them, direct hands-on at all times, and that's a non-starter. I mean, in a perfect world, evolved another 10 years maybe, but not this time.
What word would you use? What word would you use there?
A review board. I'm fine with a review board with
and
transparency.
That was here.
Yeah.
So
I
can I
appreciate
ask if
those
that's
points that are being made, but I also want to say the oversight language, that's something that's been embraced by many leaders in the justice field. That came out of President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, led by Eric Holder. That's something that the National Police Foundation is talking about. I mean, not to talk about this just from the law enforcement side, but if we want to find other words than oversight, that's totally fine. But I do want to steer clear of any notion that oversight is too radical or a non-starter, because it's happening.
Yeah, but review boards are not. So I mean, that's my only point is, let's do this from the point of view is we're going to have a review board and we're going to have the best one in the country. And so I think we start with, if we just be careful about that, because I mean, we want transparency, accountability, and a forum for citizens. How do we wordsmith that?
So I think
sounds like oversight.
I'm not really interested in wordsmithing. To be honest with all of you, I don't really see the clear difference in what you're talking about, and to hear that this is what's been embraced by the 21st Century Policing Task Force I'm very comfortable with it, and I think that it is important that we say that it's not the time right now for our leaders or for law enforcement to be looking at this language with a fine-tooth comb about what's going to fly and what's not going to fly. It's their job right now to be listening to the community, and I'm very comfortable with this language.
Yes, and one more thing I'll add, Spencer, is I recommend that all my colleagues check out the legislative package that the California Legislative Black Caucus has unveiled. And one of those bills is Assembly Bill 1185 by Assemblymember McCarty of the Sacramento area. And it is specifically on law enforcement officer oversight. This bill would allow counties to establish sheriff oversight boards, because currently that can only be done by a sheriff. It can't be done by a board of supervisors. So I just use that as another example of how this is very consistent with what folks are talking about from the streets all the way to the Capitol.
So just
Thank you for that explanation.
Promise me that you'll get it done, because we've been working on this for 30 years, and Rodney King was the most memorable moment in many people's lives, and there weren't a lot of police review boards that came out of that. So I want us to succeed. I don't want us to just leave a nice record of resolutions.
I'm with you, George.
So
Thank you for that,
I'll
George.
make a motion. Well, no, I better not make a motion. I'll let Jay make the motion.
Well, I also, before we go to the motion, I want to incorporate the other language, which is that the district calls on local law enforcement agencies to focus use of force policies on de-escalation. I think that's an important one, especially considering the recent events. So, I think Jonathan's got this pulled up so that we can look at. Thank you for doing that. So at this time, I would entertain a motion, if anyone has one, to adopt the resolution as amended and to create a working group that will review the other points raised in Director Freeman's amendments and create an action plan.
I move to adopt the resolution as amended to create a working group to consider the amendments, the other set of amendments that were brought forward before the meeting, and to create an action plan for this topic.
So I'd like to ask if we can take it into two motions, just because I really want this, what we're adopting tonight, to stand on its own feet as our statement on these important issues and our positions that we've established. So if possible, I think it would warrant two motions.
I retract my motion. Ethan, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. Thank you, Director Freeman. I move to approve the resolution number 20-9, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Isla Vista Community Services District to condemn police brutality and declare racism as a public health emergency as amended.
I second that motion.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there any other board discussion? Okay, then with that, I'm gonna have Jonathan call the question and call the roll.
Great. So the roll is Director Grant.
Yes.
Director Freeman.
Yes.
Director Thurlow.
Yes.
Director Bertrand.
Yes.
Director Hedges.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0, 2 absent. And then as far as the working group goes, you want to make that motion, Director Freeman?
I move to create a working group to consider the amendments that I brought forward before the meeting, as well as to bring forward is the idea that we're going to do it, the action plan is going to be the result of the working group, or is this that we would like to commit to having an action plan? Is that like what are we actually on board for here?
I think that the plan is that we figure out how to get to from point A to point B on some of the things that you've raised in your resolved clauses. So I don't know if that's a formal document as much as it's a.
Okay, let's connect them. So I move that that we form a working group in order to form an action plan in order to execute and bring to fruition and discuss the amendments and demands that have been brought forward. People okay with that? Somebody else wants to make the motion, they're welcome to. I don't need to make my own motion. But
No, you've made a motion. Is there a second to the motion?
I'm sorry. I feel like you paused a couple times. Can you just repeat it all as once?
Oh, I won't be able to repeat it. Let's try this again. I move to form a working group tasked with the creation of an action plan for the purposes of examining the issue of police brutality and racism in our community, and surrounding the with initial information, like talking points, to be the amendments brought forward today.
Okay, there's been a motion made. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Bertrand. Any other board discussion on the motion? Okay, Jonathan, can you call the question?
Director Brandt? Director
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Director Fairlawn?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Director Hedges?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 with 2 absent. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this incredibly important item, and we really do appreciate every single comment that we have. I think it's incredibly important that our community stands together and refuses to be silent during a time like this. Thank you so much for your input.
Quick question. Do we have a membership for this working group? Are you going to pick them just so that we can get a meeting scheduled right away?
I think the last time that we did a working group, I think I appointed the members of the group, but we took interest. I think it's clear that Director Friedman should be involved in the working group, and I think would like to be involved in the working group. I know I certainly would, and I think it's also important that we have a board member of color involved in the group as well.
I think that's a great idea, Spencer. And I wish that Director Nguyen was here tonight, because I think that I would really like to see if she'd like to be involved in this. I can tell you in the other hat I wear, this is what I'm working on all day at this moment. So I would like to see if Director Nguyen would be interested in entering this space to work on the working group. If not, I'd be happy to lend my assistance.
Okay, that sounds good. In that case, then, what I'll do is we'll solicit input from her, and then I'll contact the two of you offline, and we'll schedule a meeting, because really we got to take some quick action here. So thank you for being willing, Director Freeman and Director Bertrand.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, thank you again, everyone, for joining us for item 4.1. I am going to continue on in the agenda, and we are going to go to item 4.2, the district COVID-19 response. And I'm going to give it over to staff to introduce our activities in regards to the pandemic.
Yes, so there hasn't been a lot new to update since the last meeting, but we said to keep this as a standing item. The only couple things to note are that, again, I think our mediation mailer had just gone out when we had our last meeting, but we haven't seen any major change yet on people needing help from the program or traffic to our website in terms of rental housing mediation. What we have actually seen is a lot of people using our published form from the Attorney General on how to, it's like a template letter to your landlord about not having the ability to pay rent. So that actually is one of the most popular pages on our site. So that's what a lot of people are looking for our help with, but not requesting mediations themselves. In terms of homeless services, we have another item on our agenda about safe parking, and so that's been something that's come out of our discussions with the IV homelessness task force. But another thing that's new is that the Doctors Without Walls now have a regular schedule of coming out 2 Tuesdays a month, I think the same Tuesdays as our board meeting. So that's they hadn't committed to what their schedule would be yet, and now they have. And I don't know, Spencer, if there's anything you wanted, or George, you're on the group too, if there's anything you wanted to mention from the county COVID-19 homelessness task force that they're discussing, but I think that's about it.
Thank you for the update, Jonathan. I'm very happy to hear that we've got a regular schedule for Doctors Without Walls. I know that's something that we spoke a little bit about on the task force, of making sure that they're getting out there to all the different encampments that exist, even some of those that are a little bit further out near the open space. So I'm excited to hear that. It's also really encouraging to hear that we're seeing more use of the guidance or from in regards to tenants issues. I'm glad to hear that. I know I can't remember if at our last board meeting our mailer had gone out yet. I think it was right around that time, but I received the mailer, and I thought it was a great way of communicating about the services that our residents can receive in regards to the pandemic, and in regards to asking for rent relief or rent adjustment, or dealing with some of the interpersonal housemate issues that can occur when everyone is cooped up for work from home, as we have all been. And I know that as the month changed over, and now for UC Santa Barbara, we're into finals week, I can imagine those issues are only more heightened right now. So it's good that we got that information out there.
And I guess the last thing there's not going to be any need for us to make a major funding contribution to food, since United Way was able to do that.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Thank you for the update. I think we'll probably continue to keep this update on the agenda just so that we're all keyed in as things change with the pandemic, and where there are gaps that we may need to fill in services. I know it was announced that there's going to be further reopening as the week commences, now that we have moved more quickly through phase 2, and I believe that the next 2 things that are allowed to be open are bars that don't serve food, as well as I think hair salons are on the list, and gyms as well. So we continue to monitor those things. I know I've continued to receive some feedback from members of the community who are concerned about social distancing and whether it's happening or not in Isla Vista. And I think it would be good in our messaging, or if we can sort of get clarification as things begin to reopen, what is an appropriate social gathering? Because I think that there's an impression out there that as our business community and our economy begins to reopen, that we can also sort of just go back to normal and the floodgates can sort of open up. And I think that that is a really dangerous mindset for folks to get in. And so it'd be great if we could continue to push out through our messaging as we have been on social media, the importance of social and physical distancing, and continuing to limit social gatherings. Any other feedback from board members?
I'd just like to thank our staff for continuing to work to assist our community in navigating this uncharted territory. I've heard so many thanks and praises for the work that we're doing for our houseless brothers and sisters. So thank you to staff for that. And I know I've been able to visit a lot of businesses in Isla Vista that are reopening, and it seems like they're doing a lot of good work. And I can feel excitement from my neighbors who are excited to once again visit the businesses that shape our community. So I think it's an exciting time in Isla Vista, but I definitely want to be conscious about the health of our community as well as the well-being of the most vulnerable. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. I think that's a great segue into the next item that we have, which is the Pardall closure and downtown business activation. This was something that we've discussed from the beginning when we had our Isla Vista working group of the RISE committee, which was tasked with looking at how we reopen in our economy in a way that is distant, in a way that is safe. And so I wanted to agendize it so that we can specifically hear from the public and get feedback on the potential benefit of doing something along the lines of closing down Pardall temporarily in a way that's similar to what we've seen on State Street. I personally haven't been to State Street since they've employed their new measures, but I've seen many pictures, and it, I think, looks like it's really a model. It seems, from what I've been hearing, to have near unanimous support and adoration from the community in terms of a way of getting local folks back into our downtown core. And I think that really this is an opportunity for us to do something similar here in Isla Vista. So on our agenda, I know we've got attached some information from the county about the SBPEP program, which is another way that local businesses can utilize public right-of-way and sidewalk space for dining. But I think we also wanted to go a little bit, I think we've got a representative maybe from the county here with us. I think, is that you, Mr. Snedden from Public Works?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Would you mind giving a little bit of an overview of what you're considering and sort of what your process has been so far?
Sure. Thank you for having me here actually to do that. So in general, the county-wide program is exactly what you said. It's intended to help get businesses back open and back on their feet, but safely with social distancing. So there's a couple of elements to it. I'm with Public Works, so the element that I'm most involved in is the use of the public road right-of-way. So we've looked at on sort of a case-by-case basis areas in the county where businesses wanted to reopen and how to do that safely, but using some of the public right-of-way to do that. There's been the ordinance has been passed to allow that to happen. The second piece of that is that planning and development is looking at how to reuse existing space for existing businesses for things like expanding into their parking lot areas with their dining and different ways to let people get open a little bit or open with some good social distancing. So that's really the intent of the program. And as it relates to right of way, Isla Vista is a really unique, obviously, area, and the idea of closing Pardal has come up, many times over the years. In general, sort of the issue that there's been with that is that some of the businesses might not actually want Pardal to be closed. The difference between Pardal and like a State Street and Santa Barbara thing is that Pardal has several businesses that have off-street parking. So if you just close down the street, you can actually impact their business negatively because they can't use their parking areas. So we are definitely open to looking at some new options for Isla Vista and what we want to do with Pardal in particular. But what we would be looking for from you and from others is like a really good community consensus on what people would like to see out there. There's various options we've looked at, but we're kind of at the stage where we kind of need some feedback. We could take it piece by piece or business by business, or we could try and do sort of like a more comprehensive thing on Pardal if there was good consensus about what people want to see.
Thank you for that overview, Chris. I think that it really helps frame the issue and the potential that we have here with a program like that. Before we continue, I just want to open up public comment because I think we've got at least one speaker here who wants to say something about this. So I'll first go over to Melissa Cohen. Are you here?
I don't think he's in the meeting anymore.
I think maybe muted. I'm seeing she's on here. Maybe she wasn't able to be here.
Unmuting her.
Oh, wait, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Sorry, I called in. I have dinner plans, and so I had to start being mobile on my phone. I apologize. Thank you. This meeting has been pretty incredible, honestly, you guys. So it feels interesting to shift into this topic. And I just want to say, I'm the general manager of the Isla Vista Food Co-op. I don't speak on behalf of all businesses. In fact, I am very not totally connected to the current desire of many of our businesses. In fact, I don't even know the space within which many are functioning in terms of being able to reopen. So I think there's a lot of research that can be done to make sure we have the voice of the broader business community. I can speak from the place of the co-op, and knowing that the co-op's patio is a resource for the community that allows for gathering. I don't believe that the co-op plans to reopen the patio anytime soon. It's not the biggest value add for our business. Obviously, we're an essential business, so we're in different service right now. So I do see that there's a real opportunity for other businesses that can benefit completely from people being able to actually be social, but socially distant in their space. Not just as a value add to the business, but it's kind of like a reclaiming of a little bit of the vibrancy of Isla Vista that, I think that responsibly could start to be reclaimed a little bit. And I think that by offering a space to be used in a unique way, as we've talked about for years in IV, pushing the boundary of placemaking through using spaces, I think that there's a deep connection with offering public right of way for more public to gather, especially at this time when I think that we've been talking about some pretty incredible uses of space in Isla Vista to also help bring visibility to some of the other really important things we're talking about. So I think that the Pardal opportunity stands to be really intersectionally beneficial. I'll use that word because I think it will benefit business if they choose to go that path. But I also think it really stands to benefit our community coming back out with some intention, maybe not just to support business, but I don't know exactly how the program works, if it's all public, like if the public right of way used and it's all about the businesses investing in their own furniture and like actually making the investment to have chairs out there, or if there's an opportunity for some public areas in that private kind of space creation for a restaurant. So that's a question that I would have about how the space is used. But if so, it seems really relevant for opportunities to creatively and thoughtfully allow to gather and do things like a live art mural in the middle of the street. I'm not I haven't been to State Street, honestly. I've been at the co-op a lot, but Anyway, so I just wanted to speak in favor, not just for the possibility of business like being renourished, but a real revitalization of what's been like a really quiet, especially since UCSD left, we, you know, even deader than dead, not having many people around. At a time when this community probably could really use that opportunity to creatively regather. So those are my thoughts to the best of my ability, and I hope you could hear me okay.
Yes, we could. And thank you for your comments, Melissa. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Are there any other members of the public that want to speak on this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to our board, and I wanted to ask a quick question for Mr. Sneddon. So have you guys thought about, or would you have the capacity to do sort of a temporary closure that's closed for part of the day, but maybe not the entire day? Because I think, at least the way that I have understood it, is State Street, there are portions of the street that are closed off, but it's not like the things that are there, the tables and the furniture, are just permanently stored there. They have to be consistently moved out, and then just like when it comes to the sidewalk right-of-way program that the county runs as well.
So that's a great question, and that's actually kind of some of the shaping of the idea that we're looking for. First of all, I forgot to mention a couple things. One is that there's phasing in terms of what's happening with governor's orders and the public health department orders, and that determines which businesses get phased in. The other interesting thing is Isla Vista is there's a phasing in the sense that it's a summertime right now or coming. So it's an opportunity to kind of try something with a little bit of a lower risk of impacts. And that way we can, you know, kind of fine tune it for when school opens and if people return or when they return eventually. But in regards to like a closure during the day or moving something like that, those are options. We really need to look at, like I said, getting some consensus and seeing what the impacts are to the businesses. So the options we've kind of like talked about are closing it completely, which has always been problematic in the past. And I'm talking about the loop part of Pardal between the two Embarcaderos. It's been problematic in the past for the businesses. Like I said, they have parking lots, but that's an option if we could get them on board with that. Another option would be to, for example, create like a one-way for vehicles and then close like half of the road to get some more room out there for people to work. And in the various options, we could also look at things like you mentioned of like, you know, closing it for parts of the day and taking deliveries at different times or things like that.
Okay, that's really good. Thanks for framing it that way. I know it sounds like you've had some businesses that may be a little resistant to the idea. I just want to say, we talk about on this board a lot about what can we do to support our business community, especially in the summertime when, as you mentioned, Mr. Senda, we've got sort of a time to experiment because there are less people around, but also that the fact that there are less people makes it more difficult for our businesses to navigate the seasonal nature of our community. And so I think there's a real opportunity here. And I know I would love for us and our staff to continue to work with you to try and identify those businesses that may have concerns, try and alleviate those concerns and put together something that works, because I think potentially this is something that can really draw in those folks who are locals to our community, that remember fondly their college years in Isla Vista and would like to patronize the business community. And this can be a great way to reintroduce them to us here in Isla Vista. So we'd love to continue working with you or begin to work with you to try and identify those concerns in those particular businesses. Are there any other directors that have anything to add on this item? I'm not seeing anything. So with that, thank you, Mr. Senator, for the overview, and we'll be in touch to follow up about future steps.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we are going to move to item 4.4, which is the community garden year-end report. So I think we've got representatives from our community garden who have been patiently waiting. So I'll hand it over to Jonathan if he's got anything to preface this with, and then over to them. Thanks, guys.
I have nothing to preface, unless just to ask if you guys need me to do the screen share or not.
Yeah, so Whitner, I think you're going to do your PowerPoint slide. Is it possible for Whitner to share a screen?
It is, but I didn't receive a PowerPoint. So yes, I guess we will. I only had like a Word doc and an Excel sheet. So yes, I'll share. I'll let Whitner.
Okay.
You should be allowed to share your screen now.
Okay, I'll just quickly introduce myself and then pass it off to Whitner. My name's Katie Maynard. I'm the advisor or co-advisor with the United Methodist Church for the Methodist Community Garden Project. And I'm really excited to be here today and to share with you some of the great work that we've been doing with Whitner's leadership. Whitner will lead off in the presentation today, and I'll be there as well for any questions at the end.
Yep, and just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Whitner Grange, manager, Methodist Community Garden, and my position is kind of like funded and run through UC's Global Food Initiative. Yeah, and as Katie said, like she's my advisor on this project and provides an incredible amount of help to me, as well as, you know, connects the garden to Edible Campus program, which is a beautiful and flourishing program at UCSB. And we collaborate on a lot of like workshops and etc. Whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, without further ado, I'll just share my screen over here. And yeah, can everyone see and present? Okay. So Katie, is that going?
Good.
That's good. Okay, sweet. So Methodist Gardens. So what's new and what's next, basically. We kind of went over a lot of the kind of yearly summary stuff when we last talked a couple months ago. So this is going to be like mostly a brief recap of that. We're going to talk about kind of expenditures again, kind of how we spent the money, refreshing on that, and going into next year and our plans and a budget proposal. Yeah, so just first off, kind of just some metrics and highlights. And I don't really like to see the garden broken down into a bunch of metrics, but I think this is a nice way to kind of put everything down on paper and show off some of the awesome work that we've been doing. So I don't have to read through all of these, I don't think, but as you can see, we've kind of just been really hard at work, and a huge programming focus has been kind of going on through the past year. In addition to, you know, building out the garden, which takes up the majority of my time, we had a lot of infrastructure to develop, including our pizza oven, which I'm always excited about, and obviously, you know, growing food, maintaining the garden, etc. Also of note that I'll point out is our partnership with Compost Collective, which has been, you know, hugely helpful to the garden, bringing like a lot of just really great organic material to feed our soil throughout the year. And that program was put on pause, but while they were operating, they were bringing in a little over 300, I think it was 310 pounds of food material per week, just to the Methodist garden. And that was probably, at the time they were doing that, that was probably, I would say 3/4 or 50% of what was going into our compost bin. the rest being community contributions. So somewhere in the 500 to 600 pound range per week of material that's being diverted from a landfill free of charge for our community members and going into feeding the soil in the garden. So that's pretty awesome. Besides that, yeah, workshops have been incredible. One workshop, we did how to make your own sourdough, and there were, I think, over 50 people in attendance to that, and a great mix of kind of permanent residents and students. So those are always like a ton of fun. Yeah, let's see. And obviously just the community space itself. So people come through the garden on their own time, take vegetables, hang out, meet friends, etc. And okay. Yeah, so current state of the garden and management. So basically, as I said, we kind of were working on developing infrastructure throughout the past year. And right now, most of that's pretty much built out. So as far as physical infrastructure in the garden, we're pretty much just on maintenance right now and kind of maintaining the crops and kind of more into like a steady business as usual style of management. Because of COVID, I was out of town for a few months to be with my family. And we had Selenia, our outreach coordinator, taking care of the garden while I was gone. And she was leading a lot of our programming efforts during COVID, which Katie, if you want to touch on some of those.
Yeah, so we've started to switch to a virtual format for all of our materials for the garden. We have now hosted 3 webinars this past month on different gardening techniques. We've also been developing blog posts that can go out on our website, as well as Instagram TV series. So we have different Instagram TV series based on, say, composting or how to start a raised bed in your backyard. And have been doing those in sets of videos that are short enough to be played on Instagram. So really trying to keep our educational programming and our outreach live and active throughout this whole period. We also just relaunched our volunteer program. We can't do full volunteer days given COVID and given the social distancing requirements, but we're doing solo volunteering. And so we have a registration form out there. Folks can sign up to volunteer with the gardens, and then we'll set them up to come out either at a time when there's one other person at the garden or no other people at the garden to do specific tasks, but whether they can still support the garden and still get some time to be out there, be out in community, be out in the sunshine, and helping out without having fear of interaction with too many people.
Yep. And just to add on to that, I'll say that I think maybe it's kind of the push towards gardening in general for kind of the Ivy culture right now, but it seems like there have been just as many people as usual interacting with the space, even though I think Ivy's population is less than what it usually is. The garden's, still getting a lot of attention from neighbors. So that's cool to see. And thank you, Katie, for helping out there. And adding on to kind of what's coming up next, I'll say right now that I'm actually going to be stepping down as garden manager in the next few weeks, kind of just for some personal reasons. And I'm going to be moving out of town for a portion of the summer. But we have kind of the help of Edible Campus program behind us, and I'm committed to kind of making a smooth transition into summer, getting a new manager hired, and then taking things on from there. Besides that, we've had some wonderful, hot weather, and it's going to be really good for growing some plants and a really beautiful harvest in the fall. And throughout the summer as well. We always have stuff to harvest in the garden. So.
And Whitner, I'll just jump in really quickly to say it's going to be a huge loss to lose Whitner. He's been provided so much, both leadership, and vision, and support to this garden over our time here. But we're also really excited about the opportunities as being able to share this position with others as well. Very recently, we posted a similar position for another one of the gardens that we work with, and we had 35 applicants for the position. distribution. So we also knew that there are a lot of folks, students that are out of work right now. So we know that we'll be able to pull in new garden leadership fairly quickly. It'll be huge shoes to fill, so that'll definitely be an uphill battle. But we are confident that we'll have a really great hiring pool to pull from.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to just see kind of the different applicants and hopefully get like a super passionate, garden manager to kind of put their own put their own passion into this project and see what sort of like new paths that the garden's going to take. So that's really exciting. Okay, so moving on, we have our grant spend out. So this is from the money that we were allotted, a little over a year ago. And this hasn't changed too much since a couple months ago when we talked. I don't think we've made all that many purchases. And we still have a little over 900 left. Yeah, that's it. And as you can see, kind of the bulk of this is our outreach position. And then behind that, infrastructure, tools, seeds, and then, miscellaneous costs and things like that. So this is I guess this will shift a little bit, which we'll see kind of in like our budget proposal. We're going to be doing kind of more on the personnel side and less on the infrastructure side, kind of moving that over to more maintenance things. And we're also expecting kind of our seeds and plant start purchases to go down as well, as we kind of like do more planting from seed, and we don't have to, and that includes some fruit tree purchases, which we won't be making next year. So that cost should go down as well.
And I'll just mention one other thing on this slide as well. We were really lucky that Whitner was able to secure a prestigious fellowship over the past 2 years with the UC Global Food Initiative, which meant that his position did not have to be funded directly from the garden. It was actually funded through UC Office of the President. That's a fellowship that's very specific to the student and not to the project. And so we're not anticipating having a UC GFI fellow next year.
Yeah. Okay, and with that said, moving on to the next slide. So this is kind of showing what we're shifting towards in the coming year. Like I said, kind of this past year, we've been all over the place in terms of building out a lot of infrastructure that takes up a good majority of time. And then, regular garden maintenance. On top of that, we do our volunteer days once a week, plus, additional days for special, reasons, special events, and community events on top of that. Did I mention workshops already? I think so. Yeah, probably a good amount of times during this presentation. But yeah, so in the coming year, we're going to be shifting more towards kind of increasing productivity now that we know the space, we have it all under cultivation. So moving towards productivity and getting down a sort of food distribution plan so that we can really be more efficiently connecting food to people in the community. Right now, food goes to volunteers, congregants, and then passersby often will take things from the garden, but kind of really getting more diligent about recording all of our yields and getting those formally to a food distributor so that we can kind of have that really more efficient system and make sure all that food is going to use. And as our productivity increases, we'll make sure all that food gets eaten. So that's really exciting. I'll kind of skip by
this is an area Whitner's actually done really amazing work on, because in the past few years, we've really been restricted to kind of members of the garden. So as Whit said, sort of volunteers and congregants, folks that were engaged with the garden space. And that was kind of how our food safety regulations worked, is that we had to sort of stay within anybody who came out and volunteered or participated with the garden. And we weren't able to do third-party distribution of food. One of the things things Whitner worked on this summer was working very closely with Kendra Weiss from Santa Barbara County Health Safety Department to understand what it would take for us to be a community food producer, which is a new guideline that allows community gardens to donate food more broadly across the community. So we've been working really closely with Kendra on that. We're very close to being able to launch that. So we have all the permissions and the support in place to both meet those health safety requirements and be able to distribute to a broader community. So that's what we're looking forward to this summer.
Yep. And on that first point, the Houseless Employment Program, so we had talked about this at our last meeting, and we've been kind of working to make headway on this, which has been harder with me being remote for a good part of the last couple months. But yeah, still super excited about this. And mostly my passion for this is just fueled by the houseless folks that sleep at the garden, who have just been doing incredible work in the space. It's like really, really inspiring. In particular, one gentleman named Paul and another guy named Abel are just constantly doing things. So I'll like come to the garden and a new area is mulched and weeded, and Paul's watering and, you know, excited about planting something else. And it's just like, it's just super, super cool to see, and makes me just really motivated to get this program underway. And we've been working with kind of United Way on this. And I've been talking to Emily Allen from United Way, kind of explaining what the garden is, what kind of a potential houseless program would look like. And they're currently kind of reviewing that and seeing if they'd want to partner with the garden on that, and kind of take care of more of like the back end stuff of hiring and payments and things like that, because that's sort of out of our wheelhouse, and we already have a lot of things underway in the garden. And kind of getting that a solid partnership would kind of make a nice ground for expansion, as we kind of look for new gardens in the community, and hopefully, you know, could blast off that houseless employment program maybe to other spaces as well. So kind of tying in there with almost like the Isla Vista Beautiful program, which is already underway. And yeah, that kind of leading into point number 4, which is looking for new garden sites and partnerships. Throughout the coming year, we're just going to be doing a good amount of networking and keeping our ear open in the community, and really just trying to find a space that might be suitable to put under food production in the same way that we've done to the Methodist garden space. And also with recording our yields a lot more diligently, doing all of that sort of stuff, getting the garden really tight operationally, that'll kind of make it a really well-oiled like model that we can just reproduce throughout town. So that's kind of the vision right now.
I want to call out and say a thank you to George, who really came up with this idea at the last time that we presented to the IVCSD. And we really wanted to run with that idea to look at options for expanding the different garden spaces in Isla Vista. Many of the partners that we reached out to were very excited about the idea of helping us to expand to new locations and potentially hosting a garden. But unfortunately with COVID, that the ability to get the commitment for those this quarter was a little challenging. So we do think we'll need the coming year to be able to solidify those additional location partnerships. But we definitely found a lot of excitement and interest. And actually another garden that we work very closely with, the St. Michael's University Church Garden, has started an interfaith collaboration around gardening and food security. And there's a number of institutions that are coming in through that we think also could be very good partners. So we've been laying the groundwork, but haven't quite been able to fully launch those additional location partners, just given the limited on-site work right now, and that all of our partners are a little bit more hesitant to start new projects at this moment. But we're very excited about working with us in the coming year.
Yeah, and speaking, kind of adding on to that, Katie, I think that applies to the Houseless Employment Program as well. We're kind of thinking that while we might not be physically expanding the garden, you know, in the next several months, that kind of a program could be employed at other spaces, such as St. Mike's Garden potentially, or other community gardens, getting houseless folks paid through that program to do work around the community. So yeah, even though we might not be like pushing the physical space barrier right now, we're kind of like looking for ways to get around the community in the coming year. And yep, so moving on to the next slide. This is our proposed budget for 2020, 2021. And I guess that's not on the top. It says June 2020. I guess that should be July 1, 2020. But yeah, so we basically have our outreach coordinator position as from last year, plus the garden manager position, which will no longer be covered by Global Food Initiative. So that's kind of, yeah, it's in addition to the budget there. And both of those we had budgeted at $14 per hour this past year, and we're raising that up to 15. So we have 10 hours for the garden coordinator, 12 hours for the manager. And then we have our houseless employment budget. So $3,000. And so that would be an average of 5 hours a week, 42 weeks at 15 an hour as well. And then on top of that, so we have a smaller budget for seeds and starts, stuff for maintenance in there, tools, expenditures come up. Also education supplies, so that would be for our workshops. Yeah, I just put in that kind of surplus funds as well, the little over 900. And you'll have to forgive my kind of lack of experience with proposing budgets like this. We might, dip into that between now and July 1, which I guess is when this would become relevant. But I feel like I have a lot of support for, kind of how to sort those nuances out. But this is it for the most part. And I don't know, do you have anything to add, Katie?
No, I think we could take questions at this point.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation, Katie and Whit. Whit, especially to you, just at the outset. I think Katie said it best, that you've achieved so much in this role over the past 2 years. And to really see how the space has quite literally blossomed is really, really special. And we appreciate all the work that you've put into this, getting the project going. And we thank you for that.
Thanks, Spencer.
Do members of the board have questions?
Yeah, I'll just echo what you said, Spencer. Whit, it's been such a pleasure to work with you and the team and Katie over these past couple of years. And we're just so proud of everything that you all have been able to accomplish. You've been placemakers, you've been community leaders, and you've turned an area in our community into really just an amazing community garden that is enjoyed by many folks, whether they directly interact with it or just pass by it and observe the good work that's happening there. So thank you so much. I'm excited for our continued partnership with the program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. Do other board members have comments they'd like to make? Okay, I will ask the question before I open public comment to our staff, because I think Whit raised this question of in regards to using some of the money in this proposed budget in between now and July. Is that something that works with our budget process?
Sorry, can I actually just clarify something really quickly there? That was just in reference to the remainder of the budget that we have for this year, which actually appears as a negative on next year's budget. So we wouldn't need to tap into any of the budget for next year until July 1. That was just in reference to the 923 that we haven't fully spent out yet, but could potentially be spent in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you for that clarification. That makes much more sense now.
Okay.
Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. Any members of the public like to speak on this item? I don't think I'm seeing any requests. So I'll close it out and bring it back I think our board hasn't as much to say because we're just in awe of everything that you've been able to accomplish over the last couple of years. I mean, I'm particularly excited to hear that in your thinking in regards to engaging with our Houseless community, that you're working with folks like Emily, who have sort of really helped us blossom this program for Isla Vista Beautiful into something that's operational and is down to a science now. And I'm really excited to see the potential for what comes of that in regards to the garden. And while the budget is, I think, a little bit more of an increase than we had anticipated in our budget, I think we'll bring it back to our budget committee to consider. I think this is a really important program that we have. And it sounds like we got some generous help from the Office of the President that maybe we weren't even all that familiar with, or our board wasn't familiar with at the time, that was bringing the true cost of this down. But I think it's an incredibly important service, and that we should try to work it into our budget for next year.
Spencer,
Any other comments?
Spencer,
Go ahead, George.
Yeah. Katie, do you need action on this right now, or waiting for our budget to be approved? Does that cause any kind of issues in terms of funding of positions or infrastructure?
That is the main concern for us, is that Whitner will be leaving us in the next few weeks, and so we are hoping to post a replacement for him. And if, for example, the board didn't fully fund this proposal, we would have to rethink how many positions or the wages that we would provide. And so we would need to hold off on recruiting for a new person to fill the position until we would get confirmation from IVCSD as to the budget.
So, Jonathan, can I make a motion that we approve this tonight with that thought in mind, that they really need to get going on their recruiting process, or is that out of line with our budget process?
No, you're able to vote to support their increased budget, and we'll just make a change in the budget process, and then come to the board in 2 weeks. We'll see it says 18,000 instead of 12,000 in there.
Well, then I'll move approval that we recommend funding this project in the amount of 16,300, and kind of urge them not to spend that leftover money.
Is recommend the right verb?
I'm not sure. I'm better.
I think you would direct staff to include this in their budget proposal.
I just put down to approve funding 18,386 in the 2020-2021 fiscal year.
Yes, I think the question that Jay has is, can we approve this for funding next year without without the caveat of we're going to recommend this to our budget? I'd rather approve it tonight.
We've done it before, where we approved that we're going to do something financially and then put it into the budget. Like the media intern 2 is another thing you voted to put into the budget next year. So
yeah, I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah,
so I think that's a great way of making the motion.
Okay.
And
George is okay.
If that is the case, I would be prepared to second it.
Okay, then it's a motion made by Director Thurlow, seconded by Director Hedges. Is there any other public comment on this item? Okay, with that, Jonathan, can you do a roll call vote?
Yes, give me one quick second. Okay. Director Brandt?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0 with 2 absences. Again, big thank you to you, Katie and Whitner, for all the work you put in. I can't wait to see how this continues to grow over the next year. And I really do want to point out something that y'all were doing sourdough bread way before the quarantine started with those tutorials, which I think is pretty special. So great job.
Thank you very much for the support of the board. We very much appreciate getting to work with you, and we're really excited to partner, not just financially, but continuing to work closely together over the next year. Jonathan's been an incredible asset to our group, as has the whole board. So thank you for your support.
Yep. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
I think, Spencer, you're talking, but you're on mute.
Thank you for letting me know. We are going to move to item 4.5, which is the district safe parking agreement with New Beginnings Counseling Center. And so I want to just preface this, that this is something that sort of came out of our Isla Vista homelessness task force that myself and Director Clearlow and a number of other community members sort of sit on with our a number of other partners in community, including IVRPD, including Katie, actually, who just left, and that county housing authority, as well as housing community development. And so this was identified as a really important thing to consider, especially in light of COVID, given the fact that the number one way that homelessness and houselessness presents itself in our community is with people who are sleeping in cars, whether that is student homelessness or whether that is homelessness in the broader community. And so we've talked about this at the board before, but I want to hand it over to Jonathan to sort of give a recap of sort of what this agreement looks like and what our role would be in it. So thanks, Jonathan.
Great. So last time I think we heard this, we still even only had a very early version of their agreement that Ross hadn't revised. So at this point, this is a final agreement. What's been attached, and what's also attached is an overview that I asked them to put together, because when we first brought this up to the board, Deborah, I think, had the firsthand experience of people coming into our office with tempers and questions. And there was rumor, the telephone game went from we are doing safe parking to we're turning the entire building into a homeless shelter, which, obviously we weren't doing, but, want to make it clear that that's not what we're doing. We have now an overview of the program attachments, and if anybody ever wants to review them, the rules that keep this as a safe program. And the only thing I want to note for the board is the agreement says for 2 spaces. We're actually able to do 4 or 5. Not sure, that depends on if we want to make available all the spaces that are under our purview or not. But if we were to, there's 20 spaces.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. I know that there was also the outstanding issue of what hours this program would be operating. And so from my understanding, the normal amount of hours would be beginning at around 7 p.m. Those that are approved in the program to have spaces in the parking lot would be able to utilize the lot and park their vehicle there. And then they would be able to stay there until around 7 a.m. when, if they weren't gone by then, a lot monitor would come around and ask them to, I think Jonathan just jumped off, but ask them to leave. And so I was going to ask for confirmation that that's still the case. But I think Jonathan's having some connection issues. Yeah, I just got a text message from him that his internet is out.
Maybe Deborah can help.
So
Deborah?
Yes, sorry. You know what, Spencer? I'm not sure about the 7 a.m. hour because of the operation for the clinic. That would be my only guess. We would need to confirm that it would be 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Hi, I'm back. Sorry. I'm on my phone now on my data plan because my Cox internet is not working at all right now. So I don't know where I cut off in my presentation.
That's okay. Also, yeah, you and me both. Internet's not great right now. So I was asking about the hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Is that something that is cleared with the clinic that will work? Is that times that will work for them? I know that they've got employees that come in early in the morning.
Yeah, I think the clinic opens right around then, so it should be fine in terms of the hours. But we don't have, I think, I don't know if I mentioned this, or I don't know if you heard me mention it, but we're able to change the times to be any ones we want. Like, I also think it should be a little later in the day eventually. Right now, the community room's not being used at 7 p.m., but it usually is. And so we might want to look at like a 9 or 8 p.m. start time. I think 7 a.m., when I check the clinic hours, I think they open at 8. So it should be okay. Yeah, they open at 8.
Okay,
so we should be okay.
That's great to hear. And so just to refresh our memories, I know I mentioned we know that there's a lot monitor that goes around and makes sure that everything is going smoothly each night. And are there other services too that are connected with the program?
Sorry, Spencer, what was the question? Or was that a
so
question?
So there's the lot monitor that comes around. Are there? I know in the past there was something about, I think, bathrooms that came up. Is that something that we'd be providing as well?
Yeah, we wouldn't organize that. That's all this is up to New Beginnings to organize. And if we wanted a restroom, that's definitely doable. I mean, it's a major part of the program to have these kinds of services so that people can safely stay there. And it wouldn't be our building's restrooms. It would be, the portables that they bring in.
Okay, great. Thank you. That makes sense. Are there other questions from members of the board?
Yes, Jonathan, thanks for giving us this update. As far as entering into this agreement with New Beginnings, is this within our existing use of the property with the county, or is this something that we need to seek county approval for?
Ross, would you be able to answer that? I asked Ross if he could check on that specifically. Let me see if we need to unmute him or something. Okay, Ross, you should be able to, you're unmuted now. Still muted.
There we go.
Okay, here we go.
Given the times under consideration for this particular use are during times when normal operations for the buildings would not be underway, this is consistent with both the district's powers under 61-250 and its use of the parking lot for this particular purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ross. Any other comments from members of the board?
Spencer, George?
Go ahead, George.
Real quick. I think this is, I mean, let me first point out that a lot of the data has shown that the houseless situation in Isla Vista involves people who don't sleep in their cars, they couch surf, they move from apartment to apartment, they have no real place to live, but they live on people's couches. So this is more, I think this is a different demographic than many of our traditional houseless people. And again, I'll express the same concern I've said a couple of times now, which is I really worry that the rest of the county is exporting the cost of dealing with this particular social issue onto Isla Vista. And so this is a county-wide issue. I really think we need to continually ask the county, because every time I turn around, I'm reading somewhere where they are pushing homeless people out of some area, despite what the current regulations are. Having said that, this sounds good. Thank you for pulling it together, Jonathan.
Thank you, Director Thurlow. Are there any other comments from members of the board?
I have a comment.
Well, go ahead, Father John.
I do have several houseless friends in Isla Vista who have lived in their cars as residents for many years. I can think of 3 or 4 in particular. And these are people who would fit the criteria here. That said, there is definitely some relocation going on within the county right now. I can only address that anecdotally, but there definitely are folks that are showing up that have been sent here from elsewhere. But I heartily support the safe parking program. I hope it flourishes all over the county, and I think we need to do our part here. I'm very supportive of this.
Thank you for those comments, Father John. Having heard that, I again want to thank staff for putting this together, getting this agreement worked out, and if the agreement is ready for us to move forward on, I would entertain a motion to approve it.
So move.
I'll second that.
I'll let Father John do that.
Okay, I think I got Thurlow and Hedges for the motion and second.
Yeah. That's to clarify that we're going to put in 4 or 5 instead of 2 on the agreement. Whatever they say, they're going to decide for it, but 4 or 5 is okay instead of 2.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Is there anything wrong with starting with 2, seeing how it works out, and then moving to 4? I mean,
yeah, we can do that too.
Why don't we do that? Just let's see how it goes, and then we can go to 4 or 5 if it seems to be going okay. But jumping into 4 or 5 might be jumping into the deep end.
Yeah, I'm sure they would be okay with that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's friendly with the maker and the seconder.
Yes.
Okay, we'll mark down 2 for that. and we'll specify hours that are later. I don't want to box you into specific hours based on what the conversation you have with New Beginnings is and what their suggestion is, but I do appreciate the attentiveness to want to shift it to a little bit later, just given the community room and just Isla Vista is a town of night owls, young people in that way. I think it works a little bit better. Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to the board. We've got the motion on the table. I'll call the question, and Jonathan, can you do a roll call vote?
Yeah, Director Brett?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Thurlow?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Director Hedges?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 with 2 absences. Thank you, everyone. Really excited to see this program come to fruition. Okay, now we're going to move to item 4.6, an update on Isla Vista move out. So I'll hand it over to you, Jonathan.
Great. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Deborah since she's been our point person working on Move Out, and she's done an amazing job getting this website together that is linked on the agenda. And I'll let her walk through some of the things we've done and some of the things our Compost Collective folks have done too.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we were able to put up our Move Out website, which lists a lot of information for our Isla Vista residents, combined with our County of Santa Barbara information and waste management program. Our website information includes information about bulky items, which is at the top of the list for disposal. One of the items that we added today, which we had discussed adding earlier but failed to do, which came up, was, of course, how to get rid of bicycles. So that was added to our website page. Very exciting was our work with the food co-op, who's turned their patio into a move-out resource center at this time, handing out free boxes and, gloves and trash bags for pickup. And they sent us a blurb, so we were able to advertise that on our website, along with the Isla Vista Compost Collective's group Food on Wheels program, which they do in association with the Associated Student Bodies and the Food Co-op group and EcoVista. So we're very excited about that. They're asking people to sign up now for our composting program because we have room or capacity for additional homes. But the Food on Wheels program is designed to have non-perishable foods donated at our IV Compost Collective location collection sites at one of the Window of the Sea Park and at the Food Co-op Center. And as Jonathan shared just a little while ago, we have had over 178 people hit up the website, the Move Out website page. So we're excited to hear that. We know that we're spreading the word about the Community Services District and the services that we provide and the coalitions that we can bring about in our community. Are there any questions about the Move Out website?
Deborah, I just want to say this is great work. Please continue to push on this. This is going to be a disaster. I'm really, really worried about this. I was walking through Isla Vista today, and there's already crap, which of course I had to go through. And there was nothing very good in there. But Yeah, I just think without the IV sale thing, this is going to be a real mess. And I think one of the key partners for you to continue to touch base with is Marburg.
Yes, we will continue to reach out to Marburg. They've agreed to do a pickup every day and to pick up frequently throughout the day. And there's actually a number there where we can call out for additional services. And the sale was able to reach out Viviana and Gina and myself. We were able to reach out to all of the local thrift stores, and the thrift stores are open and accepting items. We thought that that was going to be a real crush for the community, but we're hoping now that they're open, that'll help to alleviate some of the litter that's out there. And we did publicize that information.
Great, great. I had heard the thrift stores didn't want any of it. Is that was a couple of weeks ago, though?
They're not taking any furniture. They're not taking any bulky items at all. And literally, Alpha Thrift just opened yesterday. So they're open. We'll have to see how much they can take because I'm sure they're going to be inundated. But we did disseminate that information. We hope that people will use that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And another thing we're trying to do with the bulky items is our Ivy Beautiful staff are going around. The Marburg pickup starts on Wednesday, and like you said, it has already accumulated. And so they're trying to identify them and then send them to Marburg so that the things can get picked up now, since sidewalks are already blocked. So they're out there as well, observing and taking notes on what needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you, Deborah, for all your work putting this together. I think this is an excellent resource that deserves to be shared to everyone in the community. And I really want to highlight and appreciate the work that the Compost Collective is doing, not just when it comes to composting, but also when it comes to repurposing these non-perishable food items. I know I'm going to stop by the window to the Sea Park later this week and drop off some cans for donation there. I'm really glad to see that out there as well. So while I think I share everyone's immense nervousness about the move out situation under COVID and the loss of the give sale this year because of COVID, which is going to be, I think, tremendous. I think that I want to just point out the silver lining that we've never really gotten all these resources sort of compiled into one place. And I think that what Deborah and our staff have put together with this Move Out webpage is a model for what we can use going forward to try and really organize the community into how to move out in a way that keeps cleanliness in mind and keeps sustainability in mind. Moving forward, I think we're really sowing the seeds for what we can do once things go back a little bit to normal and we can utilize that give sale partnership. Any other comments on this from members of the board?
So let me just throw out one crazy idea, which is this: if the situation gets serious, and maybe I'm just worrying about it too much, I think we should think about the idea that we would help subsidize Marburg to do even more pickups for a very limited amount of funds. I think a little bit of money could go a long way in terms of our community. So I just throw that out to Deborah as maybe that's something to think about if it starts to look like we've got couches on every street corner.
And that would
So,
fall under
I don't
our
know if
community
we're
facilities power under the same thing as the beautification program.
I'm sorry, what was that question, Jay?
And that could maybe fall under our community facilities power in the same way that our beautification program does, considering it sounds vaguely similar in the sense that if somebody would report that there's something on that corner, we might send a person to mess with it.
We've actually been, and Jonathan might chime in on this too. We've actually been talking to the County of Santa Barbara for some time about how we might be able to have them integrate our C-Click Fix program into some of their waste collection or less is more program. So if we could get them to partner with us on using the C-Click Fix program, we could actually have those pictures sent in directly to them, and they could in turn interface with Marburg and have those pickups happen. During move out, Marburg has agreed to do daily pickups and to do dumpster pickups if overflowing on request by telephone request. So we are working with them. I'll continue to talk with them. I don't know if we can get them out there more than on an as needed basis, because that is their commitment right now. But we'll have to see how that really looks starting June.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to give you an extra card to play.
Yes.
In
Thank you, George.
In case it gets a little bit crazy, because once they're done with their pickups, they're done. And then if the stuff is still out there, so I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't worry so much about couches on the corner. But anyway, thank you for your work on this.
To also
One last
answer
question.
Director Freeman's inquiry about which power would be authorized or would authorize that action, 61250D1G authorizes the board to acquire, construct, improve, and maintain sidewalks, lighting, gutters. So to the extent that the debris from move out falls under maintaining the sidewalks and the gutters, Section D1G would authorize the board to supplement it the way that Director Thurlow suggested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ross. One last question to our staff. I think a number of residents, I don't think I got it on my door, but a number of us received door hangers put out from Public Works regarding couch burnings. And I guess I just wanted to see if you guys were keyed in on that and made aware of that before those went out, because I was a little concerned with some of the messaging on the door hanger.
Yeah, well, Deborah and I did meet with them about this, and we did offer to help design, to help build the messaging on them, and to even help pay to expand where they're delivered, because they do only deliver them to 2,000 out of the 37 households in IV. Maybe it's not 2,000, but it's not all the households. So we offered our help in all these different ways, and I don't, it wasn't really accepted. And then they moved ahead, and I didn't know what it was going to look like until I got it on my door. Who did it?
The county did.
County.
But who county? Who in the county?
The two men who came to our meeting in October, Carlisle and Brad Spencer.
Carlisle Johnson. Brad Spencer is actually our code compliance officer for Isla Vista. They've put together this information in the past. We did offer to provide them with some assistance, but they were reluctant and wanted to disseminate what information they already had. They did share with us general information about setting fires to furniture and the fines for that.
But are they in Public Works?
They are in Public Works. They
Okay.
work in the recycle reuse organization, the waste management group.
Okay.
Waste management.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, if either of you could just forward me their contact information, that'd be useful, because I just was a little concerned. I think other people on the board might share the concern that most people living in Isla Vista don't even know that couch burning ever happened here. And to give everyone a door hanger reminding them that that's something that is within the realm of possibility is completely counterintuitive to everything that we've worked for over the past couple of years. So it feels, it's another one of those things that,
yeah, I totally
it feels
agree.
like it doesn't need to be said around us, but we
No,
apparently need to.
I totally agree with you, Spencer. You know, here's an idea.
I will send to you the letter that I got that contained that information. I'll highlight it directly. You'll get it. I'll let you look at that. So I'll
Thank
send that over to you.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Thanks.
Yeah,
Sure. I was going to say, I don't think we need to do anything formal on this, but I'm going to think those of you that are moved should send an email about it.
I taught a
Go ahead,
class
Father.
one time on how to modify behavior. And I began the class by saying, first of all, I don't want anyone in the room to be thinking of a red-faced monkey. Guard your thoughts. Do not even think of a red-faced monkey. They're very dangerous. And then I asked everyone, what was the first thing you thought of? And of course, everyone thought of a red-faced monkey, or made up an image of it. And, you know, in a way, this is almost a provocative kind of a gesture. They really should have listened to us. And I hope we remind them of that at some point.
So moving forward, I really appreciate what we've been able to do this year under these less than ideal circumstances to sort of take a bigger role within the move out to help coordinate things and to push out this information. But I think we should all really keep an eye on how things are going over the next week, because I know personally, I think that our community will only benefit from us taking a bigger role in this going forward next year. And we should be as attentive and document as many things as possible so that we have a good case moving forward for next year and going forward. So thanks to our staff for being attentive to this issue and putting this stuff together. Okay, any public comment on move out? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I'll close public comment. And with that, we'll close our discussion and action portion of the agenda. And what I'm going to do is skip over closed session and move to reports. And then once we conclude reports, we'll go back to closed session so that we don't have to kick everyone out and then bring them back in. Okay, are there any reports from members of the board?
Spencer, just a quick one. George, I'm now operating.
Go ahead, George.
I'm operating on low power mode, so if I lose you all, I just want to continue to keep the board and the community of Isla Vista up to date. A private contractor, a private builder has been selected to begin the process of planning Ocean Road. Everybody at the university is saying this is going to go very slow, but I just want to say I don't think it's going to go slow. I think it's going to go relatively quickly. So a big multinational developer has been selected to begin the process of developing Ocean Road. That's it. Thank
George,
you.
Thank you, George. Do you think it'd be, well, actually, yeah, I'll follow up with you and maybe other folks in the university about potential for us getting a briefing on that moving forward. I think that would be a good thing.
Totally agree.
Any other board member reports? Okay, I don't really have much to report other than I just want to say, in case it wasn't already said enough, I'm just really proud of our community and the spirit of togetherness and really loving activism that they've shown over these difficult past couple of weeks. And I think it's just really telling that the move, both of the big actions and vigils that have taken place in Iowa Vista sprung up from individuals who were not really associated with any particular group to begin with. They just put it out there on social media that they wanted to gather, and those gatherings were able to gain thousands of participants. I think that's really special, and it just being there felt both tragic and special. So I really appreciate their work. Okay, I'm going to go to reports from committees. Any committee reports?
Policy committee did not meet.
Okay, thank you, Jay. We did have a meeting of the Community Center Advisory Board where we talked a little bit about the Community Center plan and got some good feedback. I don't think I have anything particularly new to report on this. Okay, I'll go to report from District Council.
Yes, just briefly, one issue. Before I've told the board on occasion that my firm tracks various pieces of legislation at the state and federal level that may have an impact on special district operations. Recently, on June 1st, 2020, in the House of Representatives on Capitol Hill, Congressmember John Garamendi introduced the Special Districts Provide Essential Services Act. He has 18 co-sponsors from the California delegation. And what this bill would do if passed is it would provide access to the Coronavirus Relief Fund that had been previously established for special districts. This does is it provides direct access to special districts for this money, and it removes uncertainty as expressed in the Department of the Treasury's guidance from April 15th, which excluded special districts from its methodology for releasing the funds over time. More or less, it's a function of the fact that not all states have provisions in their laws allowing for the creation of these special districts. So it required members from jurisdictions where these laws do exist for these special government entities, and it would clarify that. It would clarify that discrepancy in the Treasury guidance, and it would establish that special districts qualify in the same way that cities and counties do, allowing access. So currently it's in committee. No word yet on how long it's going to take to move, but at least there is some federal movement on providing some relief to special districts through our California delegation. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross, for that support. I'm going to go to report from General Manager.
Thank you. I want to thank the board for passing Resolution 20-9. I think it was a very important statement for us to make, and I'm excited to keep working on our action plan and beyond that, since it's stuff that's really important to me personally. In terms of the budget, as you saw yesterday, we have the recommended budget is officially noticed and for public consumption. It's on our website, it's at our bulletin board at the office, and anybody who wants more information can email me about it. The hearing is set for June 23rd, and any changes that need to be made to the budget will need to happen during the meeting itself. And so the Finance Committee will come up with suggested changes, and if any board members have changes, please talk to me earlier than later, just so we can make sure that we're prepared to have the discussion on the 23rd. But other than that, the budget is set, and just please do your part in spreading the word to people you think would be interested into your networks, and we'll do our general outreach. But yeah, June 23rd is the budget, and it's looking good for us overall. We'll know there'll be one major change, which is, the day before the budget the meeting, we'll get the revenue for May, and then we'll know more certainly where our budget's going. So, like I said before, it was not a big change for April, but we'll see how May goes and move forward from there. So the budget's in a good shape. The next thing is the census outreach, which, I want to let people know that unfortunately, even though it's June, we're still under 50% reporting in Isla Vista. And this is after, Viviana made a report of all the contacts we've made, which are in the thousands. We've made 1,200 phone calls. The information is posted on Gacho Space. It's been on social media. Our interns made sure that every group associated with Isla Vista was sharing it on top of us, so it really spread. We're still under 50%. So we'll need to figure out a new plan on how we're going to keep going, especially as, we see what UCSB is doing with fall quarter. So, and because City College just announced yesterday that it's going to be all mainly online, if not all. So that's the census. Not great news. The Compost Collective, we're going to have some policies for the board to approve, but otherwise that are needed for operation. But otherwise, Ross has finished work on some contracts we needed to. So July 6th is when that program will, it's official that it's going to start that day, and we should be ready by then. And next is the interpersonal investigator and the safety stations. So a couple meetings ago, the board asked me to work with UCPD on goals for these programs. I did meet with Lieutenant Dave Millard and Detective Kavina Avila about the interpersonal violence program, but we haven't been able to meet on the safety stations yet separately. But that's fine, because now we have new resolution to make sure that these contracts have racial justice elements and goals strictly tied into them, so we can make sure that that's taken into account. Besides that, Deborah, if you want to update folks on the mediation program and anything else that you'd like to update people on, I want to give you some of this report too.
Thank you, Jonathan. I am excited about the mediation program. Our mailer dropped, oh my gosh, I just looked at the date. I want to say it dropped on May 22nd. I'm sorry, but I'm disappointed more so in that we've only had one new submission request since the mailer went out. But I'm not deterred. I think we're still going to see an increase in activity as people continue to move out of Isla Vista. To that end, we are still looking to build up a team of mediators that we can use going forward, so we wouldn't have to rely on just one per se. We want to use the collective brain power of a number of mediators to help us to continue to flesh out our program. And one of the things that we envision is an increase in educational forums and outreach activities. So if we have a number of mediators on staff, we're hoping that they'll be able to take on educational opportunities surrounding AB 1425 or the COVID-19 or executive orders impacting non-eviction orders. And we want to get that started as soon as possible. We're hoping that we'll have 2 or 3 new mediators to introduce or have the board consider by the end of the month and maybe middle of July at the latest. But a lot of it's going to depend on activity, but we're going to be prepared when that activity begins. So are there questions about the mediation program that I might be able to answer? Since January, we have received a total of 5 submissions, but we have not had the parties involved in those submissions move forward in the mediation process. They have either resolved those issues independently, or they're still working through an investigatory process as to the merits of the mediation.
Deborah, do we
Thank
need
you
this
for that update, Deborah.
mediation program?
I'm sorry, say that again, George?
Do we need this program?
You know, I shared with Jonathan that there was some statistical information in the budget report, the summary report that we got from the budget, and it clearly indicates that people are still unaware that the program exists or how to use a mediation program. So I believe that part of the challenge is still education, creating a presence, and having our mediators really become part of our community so that people feel comfortable, both property owners and tenants, coming forward to resolve issues through this program. I think it's viable, but it's going to take a lot more work.
Thank you for the update, Deborah and Jonathan. Okay. With that for reports.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question for some combination. I don't know if Ross is still here, but of Jonathan and Ross. So we've been operating these meetings under the governor's executive order that allows us to do these meetings remotely, and I'm wondering, is there any word on maybe there's like already some like expiration cutoff that'll automatically cut off, or is there something in the opening process that was going to cause us to suddenly have to have in-person meetings? Or
No, nothing's been called out.
I haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah, in monitoring the executive orders, and they're up into the 70s, I think, right now. And when I first reported to you, the one that was applicable was number 28. So we've been monitoring all of the executive orders that have been coming out, and though we have seen, these plans regarding, phased reopening, they've all really been focused on the health aspects, and they haven't addressed any of these prior orders with respect to relaxation of the Brown Act. That's one of the things that we are obviously on the lookout for, because that will have an immediate and dramatic impact on how public entities go back to doing business as they did before. Some of our clients are choosing to use the guidelines in order to facilitate returning to in-person meetings in city halls and civic centers. So basically, the position we're taking is until the governor lifts the or rescinds the prior order, then it's appropriate for public agencies to continue meeting remotely as they have been. However, if they believe that they can uphold the guidelines with respect to social distancing and the other health measures and still be able to have in-person meetings, that their facilities will allow them to conduct in-person meetings with those health directives in mind, then it's up to them to do so at their own discretion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that report, Ross. Okay. With that, we're going to close reports and move back to session 5, closed session. This is a conference with real property negotiators under Government Code section 54956.8. The property is 970 and 976 Embarcadero Del Mar, Isla Vista, California. Negotiators are Spencer Brandt, Board President, Bob Geis, Board Vice President, Jonathan Abu, General Manager, Ross Trindle, District Counsel. Negotiating parties are the IVCSD and the County of Santa Barbara. Under negotiation of the price and terms of payment. So with that, we'll enter a closed session, and we'll move everyone who's not on the negotiating team into the waiting room, and we'll report out soon.
Okay, let me. All right, we've got everyone back from the waiting room.
Okay, We are reconvening from closed session. Council, is there any reportable action?
Mr. President, in returning from closed session in regards to the property negotiations under the listed provisions of the government code, the board took no reportable action in closed session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Okay, with that, we'll close out the meeting. Our next meeting will be our budget hearing scheduled for June 23rd, 2020. It'll be scheduled for 6 p.m. and you'll be able to join us here on Zoom as we have been doing. And we hope to see you there for a lively discussion about our next fiscal year budget. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Made by Director Freeman. Is there a second?
Second. Thurlow.
Thank you, Thurlow. Okay, any public comment? All right, Jonathan, let's do roll call vote.
Cool. Director Brent?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Thurlow?
Yes.
Bertrand is absent, and then Hedges.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, thanks everyone. We will see you on June 23rd. Wish you a clean and happy move out.